the target matrix, an operator's manual for OSINT, reconnaissance and institutional penetration. Document control, OM 2026 Rev 4. Classification, operational intellectual property. Distribution, internal use only / fictional reference framework. Forward, the doctrine of asymmetric friction. The manual contained herein is compiled for the technical professional, the intelligence analyst, and the narrative architect seeking to understand the mechanics of non-kinetic institutional disruption. In the realm of high-stakes conflict, violence is not a demonstration of power, it is an administrative admission of failure. When an operator draws a weapon, it signifies that counter-surveillance protocols have failed, the constructed legend has dissolved, and the operational environment has degraded into an unmanageable state. True power within the modern information ecosystem does not reside in the capacity to destroy physical infrastructure, but in the analytical capability to map, manipulate, and collapse an adversary from within their own defensive perimeter. This text serves as a clinical blueprint for that methodology. Introduction: the primacy of information domination. 1.1 The kinetic fallacy versus operational reality. The popular cultural imagination, fueled by cinematic fiction and sensationalized journalism, frequently misrepresents the nature of modern intelligence operations. It envisions the operative as a kinetic force multiplier, an individual who scales walls, bypasses laser grids through athletic acrobatics, hacks quantum-encrypted firewalls in seconds via a handheld terminal, and resolves institutional stalemates through high-speed vehicular pursuits and precise applications of lethal force. This is the kinetic fallacy. In the actual field of operations, such actions are viewed not as triumphs, but as catastrophic breakdowns in tradecraft. Kinetic actions leave signatures. They leave physical evidence, forensic trails, digital anomalies, and political shockwaves that invite immediate, aggressive investigation. They force the adversary into a state of maximum alert, hardening their defenses and closing the very windows of vulnerability that the operator seeks to exploit. Operational reality is profoundly more mundane, bureaucratic, and cold. The modern operator understands that the most effective weapon is not a suppressed firearm or a sophisticated piece of malware, but an unshakable understanding of human organization and administrative vulnerability. The real-world adversary is rarely an individual, it is an institution. Institutions are multi-layered leviathans composed of competing human incentives, legacy software architectures, regulatory burdens, and systemic friction points. To defeat an institution that possesses vastly superior numbers, infinite financial resources, and total territorial dominance, the operator cannot rely on force. The operator must rely on asymmetric friction. The objective is not to break the walls of the fortress, but to alter the internal environment of the fortress so that its own weight, paranoia, and structural anomalies cause it to crush itself. 1.2 The anatomy of the institutional leviathan. To exploit an organization, the operator must first strip away its outward presentation of unity and strength. No organization is a monolith. Whether it is a transnational shipping conglomerate, a heavily protected municipal police union, or a cutting-edge financial technology firm, every institution is an artificial ecosystem constructed by human beings to manage resources and information. Because these structures are human fabrications, they inherently inherit the psychological flaws, territorial behaviors, and cognitive limitations of their creators. An institution can be conceptually broken down into 3 distinct layers, each presenting a specific set of signatures to the operator's reconnaissance efforts. The formal tier, the architecture. This is the official outward-facing structure. It includes the corporate bylaws, the published organizational chart, the public relations statements, and the explicit chain of command. The formal tier is designed to project stability, compliance, and absolute control. It is almost entirely an illusion, but it is a necessary illusion that the operator uses as a baseline metric to measure deviance within the organization. The operational tier, the infrastructure. This is the mechanical reality of how the organization functions on a day-to-day basis. It encompasses the actual software applications running on the servers, the logistics routes utilized by transport vehicles, the physical security protocols executed by gate guards, and the financial clearing mechanisms used to process capital. The operational tier is governed by efficiency, habit, and cost mitigation. It is here that the operator locates technical vulnerabilities and patterns of life. The informal tier, the human network. This is the most critical layer for the operator's purposes. The informal tier consists of the actual relationships, rivalries, hidden alliances, personal ambitions, and acute anxieties of the individuals who populate the organization. It is the network of who actually trusts whom, who resents which superior, who is cutting corners to hit a bonus, and who is terrified of losing their position. The informal tier is the engine room of the institution. It drives the choices made in the operational tier while using the formal tier as camouflage. The primary objective of open-source intelligence, OSINT, and far-away reconnaissance is to pierce the formal tier, map the variations within the operational tier, and completely chart the fault lines within the informal tier. Once this mapping is complete, the operator possesses the target matrix, a comprehensive diagnostic blueprint of the organization's structural reality. The formal tier: corporate charts, public profiles, policy manuals. Camouflage: the operational tier: software stacks, logistics, gate guard protocols. Habit and efficiency: the informal tier: personal rivalries, core paranoias, hidden alliances. 1.3 The asymmetric vector and leverage. Why does information domination supersede resource domination? The answer lies in the principle of leverage. A massive organization requires immense energy to maintain its equilibrium. It must constantly process compliance paperwork, monitor internal security, manage employee turnover, and defend its market position or political influence. This constant expenditure of energy creates systemic exhaustion, commonly referred to as administrative sclerosis. Because the institution is large and exhausted, it cannot pivot quickly. It relies heavily on cognitive inertia, the tendency of management to interpret new, ambiguous data in a way that confirms their existing policies and beliefs, rather than re-evaluating the system from scratch. This inertia is the asymmetric vector. The operator does not attempt to shift the organization's direction through external pressure. Instead, the operator inserts a microscopic grain of highly targeted, unverified information into a pre-existing internal fault line. Because the organization is hypersensitive to threats, but structurally incapable of nuanced analysis during a crisis, it will overreact to this small input. The institution will deploy its massive resources inward. It will initiate internal investigations, freeze network access, lock down logistical hubs, and turn its security apparatus against its own personnel. The operator acts merely as the catalyst. The organization itself provides the destructive energy necessary for its own collapse. This is the core philosophy of the asymmetric vector, using the adversary's mass as the primary engine of their own undoing. 1.4 Data as the ultimate weapon and vulnerability. In the contemporary operational landscape, data has transcended its role as an administrative record to become both the ultimate asset and the most acute vulnerability an institution possesses. Every transaction, communication, strategy shift, and illicit compromise leaves a digital or documentary footprint. For a corrupt or clandestine organization, this data is the literal anchor of their power. It is what allows them to enforce loyalty, launder capital, bypass international regulations, and insulate their executive leadership from legal accountability. Consequently, the acquisition of this data is not merely a secondary goal of the operator, it is the ultimate objective. To hold an organization's unredacted digital ledgers, its internal communication keys, or its operational manifests is to possess total existential sovereignty over that entity. However, because organizations understand the value of their data, they insulate it behind layers of technical and physical security. Direct extraction, attempting to breach a hardened network from the outside or physically infiltrate a secure vault through force, is a high-risk proposition with a low probability of success. It activates the institution's defensive systems immediately. The strategy detailed in this manual approaches data acquisition from the reverse angle. The operator does not attempt to break into the vault. Instead, through the deliberate engineering of a domestic crisis, the operator manipulates the custodians of the vault into a state of acute panic. When individuals believe their survival is threatened, their primary objective shifts from protecting the institution's data to protecting themselves. In this panic state, they will bypass their own security protocols. They will export encrypted databases to unsecured personal devices, disable network firewalls to maintain communication during a lockout, or hand the keys directly to an outside entity they mistakenly perceive as a neutral protector. The chaos generated by the operator's ruse serves as the smoke screen under which the data is quietly harvested. The operator's Maxim: reconnaissance is not the prelude to an operation, it is the operation. 2.1 The convergence of scouting and striking. In traditional military doctrine, reconnaissance is treated as a distinct initial phase of an engagement. The scouts go forward, map the terrain, locate the enemy positions, and return to the main body to deliver their findings. Only then is a plan formulated, resources allocated, and an attack launched. This model creates a rigid, chronological separation between intelligence gathering and operational execution. In the asymmetric tradecraft practiced by the operator, this separation is entirely dissolved. Scouting and striking are the same continuous action. The moment the operator begins gathering information on a target via open-source channels, the operation has commenced. Every piece of data harvested does not simply sit in a file waiting to be used later. It actively dictates the design of the cover identity, the selection of the access vector, and the refinement of the psychological leverage points. Furthermore, this convergence is driven by the reality that an operator cannot observe a human system without changing it. The very act of conducting deep reconnaissance, even from a distance, forces the operator to interact with the digital and physical traces the target leaves behind. If the operator runs a passive scan on an outward-facing server, looks at an executive's public travel schedule, or documents the vendor trucks entering a facility, they are mapping the boundaries of the target's awareness. The intelligence gathered is live, volatile, and deeply interconnected. The operator treats reconnaissance not as a passive exercise in cartography, but as the active construction of the trap. 2.2 The observer effect in human systems. In physics, the observer effect dictates that the act of measuring a particle inherently alters the state of that particle. A parallel law governs high-stakes intelligence operations. When an operator observes an organization, any mistake in visibility, no matter how minor, will register as a signal to the target's defensive mechanisms. If an operator views a target's personal social media profile from an account linked to their actual location, or searches for a proprietary corporate patent from a traceable IP address, the target system registers a slight anomaly. In a highly insulated or criminal organization, minor anomalies trigger immediate counter-reconnaissance responses. Logs are reviewed, security guards are briefed, and communication channels are altered. To mitigate the observer effect, the operator operates under the discipline of signal minimization. This does not simply mean hiding, it means blending into the ambient noise of the target's environment so completely that the observation registers as zero signal. When conducting faraway recon, the operator does not look for the hidden secrets first. They look at what the organization willingly throws away or broadcasts to the world. By analyzing the public, unclassified, and seemingly meaningless data streams generated by the institution, the operator can deduce the shape of their hidden infrastructure without ever touching their defensive perimeter. 2.3 The taxonomy of passive versus active information. An operator categorizes all intelligence into two primary domains based on the level of operational risk required to harvest it. Passive information, open-source intelligence/OSINT. This is data that can be acquired without making any direct or indirect contact with the target organization or its personnel. It exists in the public sphere, archived on external servers, indexed by search engines, or preserved in municipal record offices. Examples include historical corporate filings, tax registries and bankruptcy court records, public job postings, technical hiring requirements, and employee resumes on professional networking platforms, archived Internet DNS records, public code repositories, and outward-facing network port maps, satellite imagery of physical facilities, local city zoning permits and traffic patterns. Passive information is the operator's primary fuel. It carries zero operational risk. A target cannot know that an operator is reading a public PDF file uploaded to a state regulatory database 3 years ago. Yet, within that PDF, the operator might find the direct email address of an internal compliance officer or the specific version number of the database software the company uses. Active information, reconnaissance/site surveys. This is data that requires the operator to observe the target's live environment, either physically or digitally, creating a potential footprint. Examples include conducting physical static surveillance on a facility to document shift changes and guard behaviors, executing non-intrusive network discovery to verify active IP addresses or mail server routing rules, engaging in low-level elicitation with non-critical personnel, e.g., couriers, facility maintenance staff, at off-site locations to understand internal office layouts or cultural moods. Active information is only gathered once the passive OSINT has established a safe framework for doing so. The operator uses passive data to build the defensive shield required to gather active data safely. If the operator knows from passive job postings that the facility uses a specific contractor for elevator maintenance, they can conduct a physical site survey wearing the appropriate high-visibility gear without raising suspicion. 2.4 The logistical foundation of the legend. The ultimate purpose of reconnaissance is to provide the raw materials necessary to construct the legend, the completely fabricated identity, corporate background, and operational purpose that the operator will use to penetrate the organization. A legend is not a costume. It is a meticulously engineered piece of administrative infrastructure. It must possess its own independent digital footprint, its own verifiable legal reality, and its own logical necessity within the target's ecosystem. If the reconnaissance is flawed, the legend will possess structural cracks. If the operator fails to discover through OSINT that the target firm recently switched their insurance carrier, and the operator shows up posing as an auditor from the old carrier, the legend collapses instantly. Conversely, when the reconnaissance is absolute, the legend becomes an irresistible force. It speaks the exact technical jargon the target expects, addresses the precise internal fears management is currently experiencing, and fits seamlessly into the organization's existing workflows. The master operator does not break into an institution through lockpicks or exploits. They walk through the front door because their legend has made their presence an absolute bureaucratic necessity for the target. Systemic overview: the anatomy of institutional collapse. 3.1 The structural dynamics of modern institutions. To comprehend how a massive, well-resourced organization can be completely dismantled by a single operator utilizing a ruse, one must study the structural physics of modern institutions. Every large entity operates under a set of internal constraints that make it vulnerable to specific forms of psychological and administrative manipulation. Information balkanization. As an organization grows, it naturally divides its operations into specialized departments: finance, legal, human resources, operations, security, and information technology. These departments operate as internal silos. They rarely understand the technical details of each other's workflows, and their heads are frequently locked in competition for budget and executive favor. This balkanization means that the left hand of the organization rarely knows what the right hand is doing, allowing an operator to feed different, conflicting narratives to different departments without immediate cross-verification. The delegation deficit. Executives at the top of a pyramid do not have the time or the cognitive bandwidth to verify the technical execution of day-to-day tasks. They rely entirely on summarized reports delivered by subordinates, and they delegate operational authority to trusted gatekeepers or independent outside contractors. This deficit creates a profound vulnerability. If the operator can convincingly assume the identity of an authorized outside expert or auditor, the executive leadership will blindly accept their conclusions without ever verifying the raw data beneath them. The survival instinct overrides protocol. Security protocols, corporate loyalty, and non-disclosure agreements are luxuries of a stable environment. The moment an employee or executive experiences acute personal terror, whether it is the fear of federal prosecution, immediate career destruction, or personal financial ruin, their primary allegiance to the institution dissolves. Their survival instinct takes complete command. They will protect themselves at the expense of their colleagues, their superiors, and the organization itself. The operator's ruse is specifically designed to activate this survival instinct in two internal rivals simultaneously. 3.2 The architecture of the ruse. A successful ruse does not rely on creating an entirely fictitious scenario out of thin air. It relies on taking a pre-existing internal truth and bending its trajectory slightly to create an unmanageable crisis. The architecture of a professional ruse follows a strict operational sequence. Phase 1 – Identify fault line. Phase 2 – Establish boring legend. Phase 4 – Leverage triggered. Phase 3 – Asymmetric injection. 1. Locating the internal rivalry. Through OSINT and physical surveillance, the operator isolates two high-level figures within the organization whose areas of responsibility naturally conflict. The most effective pairing is the earner, the individual responsible for driving revenue, managing operations, or leading field teams, and the gatekeeper, the individual responsible for security, legal compliance, internal auditing, or financial control. The earner naturally views the gatekeeper as an analytical parasite, slowing down progress. The gatekeeper naturally views the earner as a reckless liability, risking the institution's security for personal ego or profit. 2. Inserting the camouflage. The operator enters the physical or digital environment under an unremarkable, low-visibility cover story, the boring truth. This role must grant natural access to both the earner's and the gatekeeper's data structures without triggering an alarm. Typical roles include third-party liability underwriters, independent regulatory compliance auditors, facilities risk managers, or software integration consultants. 3. The asymmetric information injection. The operator sits down with each rival separately. To the gatekeeper, the operator presents a small, ambiguous data point discovered during the audit that suggests the earner is running a rogue operation, skimming funds, or setting up a corporate coup that will leave the gatekeeper taking the legal fall. To the earner, the operator presents an equally disturbing data point, suggesting the gatekeeper is compiling a secret internal dossier to terminate the earner's contract and seize their operational infrastructure. 4. The feedback loop of paranoia. The operator does not need to take any further aggressive action. The two rivals, driven by their pre-existing animosities and newly activated survival instincts, will begin acting defensively. The gatekeeper will restrict the earner's network access or initiate a secret audit. The earner, seeing this digital restriction, will interpret it as absolute confirmation of the operator's warning and retaliate by locking down their physical assets or attempting to wipe operational logs. Each defensive move made by one party serves as definitive proof of hostility to the other. The organization spirals into an internal civil war. 3.3 The life cycle of a target matrix. The complete trajectory of an operation, from the initial passive collection of data to the final extraction and erasure, is governed by a disciplined timeline. An operator never moves to a subsequent stage until the metrics of the current stage have been completely satisfied and verified. Stage title Core Objective Risk Profile. Stage I Passive Harvesting, OSINT, construct the baseline technical, legal and human map of the target institution without touching their infrastructure, zero risk. Stage Roman II Active Verification, Recon, conduct low visibility physical and digital site surveys to confirm patterns of life, vendor profiles and security gaps, low risk. Stage Roman III Legend Finalization Register corporate shells, set up communication routing, and memorize industry-specific jargon based on discovered data, low risk. Stage Roman IV Penetration and Access, insert the cover identity into the facility or network under an unforced, bureaucratic justification, medium risk. Stage V Asymmetric Injection, deliver targeted, tailored data points to the selected internal rivals to activate their cognitive biases and survival paranoias, medium risk. Stage VI Chaos Operations stand back as the internal civil war degrades security controls, creates administrative gridlock, and breaks communication protocols, high risk, managed. Stage Roman VII Data Harvesting Position, the cover identity as the trusted destination or neutral vault for compromised files during the panic, execute extraction, high risk. Stage Roman VIII Footprint Sanitization, dissolve the corporate shell, erase digital communication paths, terminate virtual phone routing, and vanish completely, zero risk. By understanding this life cycle, the operator ensures that they are never running an ad hoc reactive operation. Every move is calculated, Every reaction from the target is anticipated, and the final extraction of data occurs not through an act of high-stress theft, but as an inevitable consequence of the target system's self-induced collapse. Part I, Digital OSINT, the Virtual Footprint. Chapter 1, Digital Archeology and Vulnerability Harvesting. The modern enterprise operates under a paradox of visibility. To attract customers, recruit talent, scale infrastructure, and validate its market position, an institution must constantly publish data about its inner workings. This public output creates an unintentional, permanent record of corporate reality. Digital archaeology is the practice of collecting, cross-referencing, and analyzing these fragmented public disclosures to map an organization's internal state. This chapter focuses on the extraction of actionable intelligence without ever interacting with the target's active network perimeter. By analyzing the human capital pipeline and mapping passive technical telemetry, an analyst can build a highly accurate blueprint of an organization's structural vulnerabilities, technical debt, and administrative friction points. Section A, Scraping the Talent Acquisition Pipeline. 1. The core concept of human capital telemetry. Organizations do not hire in a vacuum. A job posting is fundamentally an explicit admission of an internal operational deficit, a structural dependency, or a looming organizational transition. When a company posts a listing for a technical or administrative role, it is forced to disclose 3 critical pieces of information to the public. 1. The current technology stack. The exact software versions, hardware configurations, cloud environments, and pipeline utilities the organization relies on daily. 2. Infrastructural friction points. The legacy systems causing operational drag, the migrations that are behind schedule, or the specific security vulnerabilities they are actively trying to remediate. 3. Organizational topology. The reporting structures, team sizes, budgetary boundaries, and geographic distribution of internal business units. By systematically scraping corporate job boards, LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, Glassdoor, and automated applicant tracking systems, ATS, platforms, Workday, Greenhouse, Lever, an analyst can convert disorganized HR listings into an operational blueprint of the target enterprise. 2. Analytical framework. The job posting anatomy. A standard corporate job description is composed of structured segments. Each segment contains specific, predictable indicators that map to internal vulnerabilities. Job description segment, explicit text focus, implicit OSINT extraction. Role title and department, senior DevOps engineer, cloud infrastructure team, maps the specific growth or stress zones within the organization's technical hierarchy. Daily responsibilities, maintain and patch legacy on-premise database deployments while assisting in the migration to AWS, identifies active technical transitions, structural instability, and dual maintenance overhead. Technical requirements, 5+ years experience with Jenkins, Docker, Kubernetes, and managing Apache 2.4 web servers on CentOS 7, provides a complete inventory of the software stack, including end-of-life operating systems and specific versions. Preferred qualifications, experience remediating security vulnerabilities discovered during recent third-party compliance audits, explicitly reveals a recent negative audit finding or an unremediate risk surface. 3. Automated harvesting methodologies. Manual collection of job postings is highly inefficient and misses historical context. To build an accurate vulnerability profile, an analyst must establish a structured ingestion pipeline that captures listings at scale, normalizes the text, and applies algorithmic keyword matrices to flag infrastructure deficits. Ingestion strategy. Most primary job boards employ aggressive anti-scraping measures, rate limiting, captures, IP reputation blocks. To circumvent these controls passively, the acquisition pipeline shifts away from browser-based scraping of the main web interfaces and targets public-facing RSS feeds, sitemap XML files, and direct endpoint queries to third-party ATS aggregators like Greenhouse or Lever, which rarely require authentication or display strict rate limits. Once the raw HTML or JSON payload is recovered, the text must be normalized, removing formatting characters, converting all strings to lowercase, and parsing out structural data, date posted, location, department, from the unstructured text block. The regex keyword matrix. Normalized text is run through a specialized regular expression, regex, matrix designed to detect signs of organizational distress, technical debt, and infrastructure configurations. For practical deep dive case study, dissecting an infrastructure friction point. To understand how human resource telemetry translates into a precise technical blueprint, let us analyze a live operational example involving a regional logistics provider, historically referred to as Example Logisticscom. The corporate security team of Example Logisticscom maintains an aggressive public posture, claiming complete digital modernization and zero external exposure. However, an analysis of their talent acquisition pipeline over a 90-day window reveals a highly vulnerable operational reality. The raw artifact, job posting analysis. The following job description was harvested from an automated ATS scan targeting Example Logisticscom's public job portal. Position: Senior Infrastructure Engineer. Department: Core Operations and Cloud Migration Group. Location: Remote/Corporate HQ. Role overviews. Example Logisticscom is seeking a talented senior infrastructure engineer to join our core operations group. In this role, you will play a critical part in our multi-year journey to modernize our supply chain routing systems. You will assist the team in maintaining our current high availability infrastructure while actively transitioning core services away from our legacy data center environment into an enterprise AWS cloud architecture. Key responsibilities: manage, optimize, and ensure the daily uptime of our primary database layer, specifically focusing on Oracle 11G instances deployed on local Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6 servers. Troubleshoot connectivity issues between our legacy on-premise inventory systems and newly deployed AWS EC2 instances via site-to-site VPN tunnels. Maintain, document, and update internal configuration scripts written in Bash and Perl that handle data normalization between disparate logistics databases. Assist the cybersecurity team in addressing open vulnerability items from our Q3 compliance audit, focusing on access control limitations within our legacy Active Directory domain. Required technical skills: deep operational familiarity with Oracle 11G, specifically real application clusters, and RHEL6. Hands-on experience building and configuring AWS VPCs, IAM policies, and security groups. Experience with legacy authentication protocols, NTLMv1, LDAP without TLS, and an understanding of how to bridge these environments with modern identity providers, Okta. The analytical extraction. By processing this single artifact through our framework, we extract an incredibly dense map of the target's internal infrastructure without sending a single network packet to their servers. Operating system and database vulnerability. The target explicitly admits that their core routing systems run on Oracle 11G hosted on Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6, RHEL6. Both of these software platforms are past end of life, EOL. They no longer receive standard security patches from the vendors unless the target is paying for hyper-expensive extended lifecycle support. This tells an analyst exactly which local privilege escalation or database exploitation vectors to research. Active architectural drift, the migration gap, the phrase multi-year journey to modernize, combined with troubleshoot connectivity issues between legacy on-premise inventory systems and newly deployed AWS EC2 instances, tells us that the target is operating in a highly complex hybrid cloud state. Hybrid migrations are notoriously prone to configuration drift. The security controls at the boundary point, where the AWS VPC meets the on-premise data center, via the site-to-site VPN, are highly likely to be misconfigured due to operational pressure to keep the systems connected. Identity infrastructure vulnerabilities. The requirement for experience with NTLMv1 and LDAP without TLS is a critical security disclosure. NTLMv1 is an antiquated authentication protocol vulnerable to rapid offline password cracking and relay attacks. LDAP without TLS means credentials are being passed across the internal network in plaintext. This indicates that if an operator gains a foothold anywhere within the internal corporate environment, intercepting administrative credentials will be a trivial exercise due to the lack of internal transport layer encryption. Operational context and friction. The mention of addressing open vulnerability items from our Q3 compliance audit confirms that an external audit has officially documented these risks, that the current internal staff lacks the bandwidth or expertise to fix them, and that the vulnerabilities remain unpatched and exposed to the environment. Section B, Technical Footprint Analysis. While talent acquisition analysis exposes the human and organizational realities of an enterprise, technical footprint analysis maps the outward-facing digital surface. This is executed entirely through passive data aggregation, querying historical internet telemetry caches, public code repositories, and decentralized globally distributed DNS ledgers. The primary rule of this phase is absolute passivity. No communication occurs between the analyst's infrastructure and the target's network endpoints. 1. Passive DNS (PDNS), harvesting and subdomain mapping. The mechanics of passive DNS. When an organization configures its network architecture, it registers domains and subdomains to route users, employees, and automated services to specific servers. Standard active reconnaissance involves performing a brute force DNS dictionary attack or a zone transfer request directly against the target's authoritative name servers. This leaves an unambiguous log footprint that internal security operations centers, SOCs, can easily detect. Passive DNS harvesting completely bypasses this risk. When users across the internet browse the web, global recursive DNS resolvers log the resolutions and cache them into massive, searchable relational databases, e.g., security trails, RiskIQ, VirusTotal. By querying these historical PDNS repositories, an analyst can reconstruct a target's entire subdomain architecture over time without ever touching the target's name servers. Forensic analysis of DNS resource records. A deep evaluation of specific DNS record types yields direct structural intelligence. MX mail exchanger records reveal the exact email security gateways and hosting architecture in use. For example, an MX record pointing to example.com.mail.protection.outlook.com confirms the deployment of Microsoft 365, while records pointing to MXA00-1A1A GMDHS, PPS, report indicate the presence of high-end Proofpoint email security appliances. This dictates the difficulty and parameters of any future communication-based engineering. TXT records SPF DKIM DMARC. These records are designed to prevent email spoofing, but they double as an exceptionally rich map of corporate software as a service, SaaS dependencies. Consider the following highly descriptive, real-world passive TXT record harvested from an enterprise target. Plain text. V equals SPF1 include SPF protection, Outlook.com include servers MCSV net include SPF Salesforce, com IP4 198, 51 100, 42/28 all. A structural analysis of this single record reveals the following dependencies. Include SPF protection, Outlook.com confirms primary corporate email is handled by Microsoft Office 365. Include servers, MCSV net confirms the marketing or corporate communication teams use MailChimp, revealing a potential vector for third-party brand impersonation. Include SPF Salesforce.com confirms integration with Salesforce, mapping out where customer and operational data is aggregated. IP4 198, 51 100, 42/28 explicitly provides the exact IP4 CIDR block of the organization's primary on-premise egress gateway or corporate VPN endpoint. CNAME canonical name, records and dangling pointer vulnerabilities. CNAME records map a subdomain to an external service provider, e.g., hosting a corporate blog on Medium or a customer support desk on Zendesk. Passive DNS scanning often identifies dangling pointers, subdomains pointing to an external provider platform that the corporation has since stopped paying for or deleted, but forgot to remove the corresponding DNS record. An analyst detecting a record like support.example.com CNAME custom, Zendesk.com where the underlying Zendesk instance has been deprovisioned, can instantly register that exact custom Zendesk instance space, effectively gaining full control over an official corporate subdomain. 2. Email architecture and identity mapping. Before an analyst can evaluate an organization's human vulnerability surface, they must map out the exact structure of the enterprise's digital identity format. This requires harvesting valid internal corporate usernames and identifying the standardized email naming convention. Automated identity harvesting via public professional networks. The primary source for identity harvesting is the passive collection of public profile fields on LinkedIn. Using specialized OSINT scrapers operating through automated browser engines and unattributable accounts, an analyst extracts the full names, job titles, and locations of every employee associated with the target corporate entity page. Naming convention normalization. Once a seed list of several hundred employee names is compiled, the analyst matches them against verified public email data found in historical breach indices, e.g. Hunter IntelligenceX, to determine the exact structural formula used by the organization's IT department. Structural pattern example output corporate adoption rate. First last at domain, John Doe at example, high enterprise standard. First initial last at domain, JDoe at example, high legacy corporate. First last initial at domain, John at example, medium mid-market tech. Last at domain, Doe at example, low small early stage firms. Once the naming convention formula is verified, e.g., first initial last, the analyst runs the entire scraped LinkedIn employee directory through an automated script that formats every name into its exact corporate identity match. This provides a clean list of corporate usernames ready for cross-referencing against authentication systems or leaked credential caches. 3. Public code repository forensics. The modern software development lifecycle relies heavily on decentralized version control systems like GitHub and GitLab. To increase velocity, corporate development teams, contractors, and third-party software vendors frequently build code in repositories that are inadvertently set to public, or they mistakenly push internal corporate code modules to their personal public profile accounts. Public code repo forensics is one of the most high-yield disciplines in digital archaeology. It regularly uncovers hard-coded infrastructure keys, structural internal documentation, and architectural flaws. Structural commit history mining. When a developer accidentally exposes a secret, such as an internal database password or an AWS API key, their immediate response is typically to delete the line of code and push a new update to the repository. However, Git is an immutable ledger. Deleting a secret in the current version of the code does not erase it from the commit history. Every historical iteration of the code remains preserved within the Git directory structure unless a highly complex history purging operation, Git filter repo, is explicitly executed. An analyst uses specialized, passive scanning utilities, such as GitLeaks or TruffleHog, to automate the analysis of a target organization's public GitHub organization page, as well as the personal repositories of every technical employee identified during the identity harvesting phase. Clone public target employee repo, extract complete commit history. Actionable infrastructure blueprint, rejects rule set match high entropy. These tools operate by calculating the Shannon entropy of strings within the historical code commits. High-entropy strings, sequences of characters with high randomness, are mathematical indicators of cryptographic keys, database passwords, and authentication tokens. High-yield configurations to target in code repositories. Package JSON/requirements, TXT/gemfile. These dependency files define the exact external library, versions the application imports. By passively analyzing these configuration files, an analyst can cross-reference the software dependencies against the National Vulnerability Database, NVD, to locate specific known common vulnerabilities and exposures, CVEs, currently active within the target's production software environment. /config JSON/settings YAML. These files are used by developers to set local deployment variables. When pushed to a repository by accident, they reveal the internal IP address naming schemas, database port mappings, internal domain controller endpoints, and testing environments used by the developers. 4. Comprehensive integrated technical reconnaissance framework. To fully illustrate the power of combining passive DNS harvesting, identity mapping, and public code repository forensics, let us examine a detailed operational scenario involving a global financial technology firm, hereafter referred to as Exemplify.com. The target organization enforces a strict external security perimeter, utilizing enterprise web application firewalls, WAFs, and multi-factor authentication, MFA, across all known public entry points. A passive, multi-vector technical footprint analysis, however, reveals a hidden structural vulnerability chain that bypasses these external controls. Step 1. Passive DNS isolation and subdomain mapping. The analysis began by querying global PDNS caches for all records tied to Exemplify.com. The query returned a list of 412 valid subdomains, while the primary subdomains, www, API, portal, were heavily protected by cloud proxy systems. An analyst isolated a series of anomalies in the historical cache. Plain text. Dev internal testing 04 Exemplify.com CNAME EC 2-54-204-12-88 Compute 1 Amazonors.com Archive Backup System Exemplify.com 19202.114. The subdomain dev internal testing 04 revealed that the engineering group was deploying development infrastructure directly into a public AWS region. Furthermore, an evaluation of the TXT records for Exemplify.com returned an SPF record containing an explicit CIDR allocation, include SPF, Google, com IP4, 203.0.113.0/24. This IP range defined the precise boundaries of the corporate development headquarters. Step 2. Employee identity mapping and pattern discovery. Simultaneously, an identity scraping operation was executed against the public LinkedIn directory for Exemplify.com. The scan recovered 180 current employees. Cross-referencing these names against historical data breach records established that the company utilized a standardized email naming convention format of first initial last at Exemplify.com. The profile of a junior software developer, Alex Mercer, Mercer at Exemplify.com, was isolated. The LinkedIn data indicated that Alex had joined the target's core API development team 6 months prior and specialized in Python and Node.js backend engineering. Step 3. Public repository forensics and commit mining. Using the identity profile developed for Alex Mercer, an automated search was initiated across public code platforms to locate personal development accounts. A public GitHub account matching the employee's unique digital handle was identified. The account hosted a public repository titled API Middleware Refactor, an open project Alex had uploaded to show a peer code optimization ideas. The repository appeared completely benign upon surface inspection, containing only standard boilerplate framework files. An automated scan using GitLeaks was executed against the repository's deep commit history. The tool flagged a high-entropy string modification that occurred 3 months prior in commit hash 8F3beta-C, 1 and 9D4E. The forensics artifact breakdown. The unredacted Git diff analysis of the compromised commit revealed the following historical code modification made by the developer. Diff /config/database.js ++b/config/database.js at -1066 at const dbhost internal aurora cluster c1 at b3 c4 d5 e6 assist 1 rds amazonors.com const dbuser amercer dev const dbpass staging password 2026 hash plus const dbhost equals process.env database URL plus const dbuser equals process.env database user plus const dbpass equals process.env database password. The structural vulnerability chain synthesis. By combining the data extracted from these distinct passive vectors, the analyst constructs a complete, actionable vulnerability chain without ever triggering an internal alert within Exemplify.com's active monitoring defenses. 1. The target asset identification. The passive DNS scan identified the active development server dev internal testing 04, example phytech.com, mapping it directly to an AWS EC2 instance. 2. The architectural context. The package, JSON file recovered from Alex Mercer's public repository, listed specific older versions of the Express and PG, PostgreSQL client libraries. This confirmed that the development server was running an identical software configuration to the code refactor project. 3. The complete authentication profile. The commit history mining extracted an authentic internal staging database username, dev, a valid internal staging password 2026, hash, and the private AWS internal RDS endpoint address, internal Aurora cluster. 4. The security control bypass vector. Because the development server, dev internal testing 04, was configured as an open testing endpoint for the remote developers, it was exposed directly to the internet without WAF protection, waiting to process connections matching the exact database credentials leaked in Alex's commit history. The organization's entire technical security posture was bypassed using only public data archeology. Section C. Operational synthesis and intelligence reporting. Digital OSINT is only as valuable as the synthesis of its findings. The final phase of this chapter requires the analyst to compile the human capital telemetry and technical footprint data into an institutional vulnerability index, IVI. This index acts as a structured prioritization matrix, defining exactly which components of the target enterprise represent the paths of least resistance. The Institutional Vulnerability Index, IVI template. An effective intelligence output standardizes the harvested data into a scannable, action-oriented matrix. The following framework organizes discovered vulnerabilities by their operational vector and systemic impact. Chapter takeaway. The fundamental lesson of digital archaeology is that an organization's security boundary is not defined by its firewall configuration alone. The true vulnerability surface is a living, breathing output of the company's daily operational processes. By maintaining a continuous, automated passive scanning posture, targeting talent pipelines and public code histories, an analyst will consistently discover that the keys to an institution's secure perimeter are openly published by its own administrative and technical workflows. Chapter 2. Legal, Financial and Regulatory Exposure. Analyzing an institution's external vulnerabilities requires a systematic dissection of its public, legal, and bureaucratic footprints. No corporate entity, industrial complex, or private institution exists in a vacuum. To operate, protect property, hire labor, and maintain infrastructure, an organization must continuously interface with municipal, state, and federal administrative bodies. Every interface leaves an indelible data trail. When an institution experiences internal distress, operational decay, or financial contraction, it cannot completely conceal these conditions. The symptoms manifest across disparate public registries and regulatory databases. By aggregating, cross-referencing, and interpreting these public records, an analyst can construct a high-resolution vulnerability profile of the target institution, identifying acute leverage points and systemic blind spots before ever conducting physical reconnaissance or technical network scanning. 1. Public records analysis, mapping corporate structures and legal risks. The modern enterprise is legally bound to transparency in its fundamental corporate structure, property holdings, and formal disputes. This transparency, mandated by statutory law, forms the foundational data pool for institutional analysis. Municipal and state court dockets. Civil and criminal court dockets are real-time barometers of institutional friction. State unified court portals, county clerks of court, and municipal civil registries contain raw, unedited narratives of an organization's internal failures, vendor disputes, and executive instability. Civil litigation and vendor disputes. Spikes in breach of contract claims, non-payment lawsuits, and collection actions filed by suppliers or service providers serve as primary lagging indicators of a severe cash flow or liquidity crisis. When analyzing court dockets, look for specific classes of plaintiffs. Critical utility and infrastructure vendors, lawsuits from heating, ventilation, and air conditioning (HVAC), contractors, electrical maintenance firms, or regional telecommunications providers indicate that the institution is deferring basic operational overhead. When an organization stops paying its infrastructure vendors, the physical plant is neglected. Maintenance routines are abandoned, monitoring systems remain unserviced, and facilities management is forced to implement temporary, uncertified workarounds to keep operations online. Software licensors and IT consultants. Disagreements over software licensing agreements or non-payment actions by third-party technology providers frequently result in the revocation of enterprise software access, missed security patches, or the abrupt termination of managed security service provider MSSP contracts. Identifying these disputes exposes an institution with degraded technical oversight or unpatched legacy software architectures. Employment and labor disputes. Employment litigation provides direct, granular insight into internal cultural fractures, workforce attrition, and insider vulnerabilities. Wage and hour class actions, discrimination complaints, and wrongful termination filings expose the internal mechanics of the organization. Labor exploitation indicators. Systematic failure to pay overtime or misclassification of employees yields immense workforce resentment. A highly resentful workforce is less likely to adhere to operational security, OPSEC, protocols, more susceptible to social engineering, and highly prone to operational negligence. The disgruntled insider blueprint. Court filings require plaintiffs to submit detailed statements of fact, including their specific job titles, department structures, immediate supervisors, and internal communications, such as emails and memos. These complaints map out internal organizational charts, identify toxic middle managers, and name specific, disgruntled former employees who possess deep, structural knowledge of the facility's physical and digital protocols. These individuals represent high-value open-source intelligence, OSINT, resources who can be interviewed or researched to map out internal procedures. Evictions and unlawful detainer actions. Landlord-tenant disputes and eviction filings against satellite offices, warehouse facilities, or logistics hubs provide definitive timelines regarding the physical contraction of an enterprise. A pending eviction indicates an imminent, chaotic relocation of assets, during which physical security controls are dismantled, asset chain of custody protocols break down, and discarded proprietary documentation or hardware frequently leaks into unsecured municipal waste streams. Tax lien registries and financial judgments. A tax lien is a formal, legal claim by a government entity against an institution's assets resulting from a failure to pay assessed taxes, such as payroll withholding, corporate income, or municipal property taxes. Secured through county recorders and state departments of revenue, tax liens represent a severe escalation of financial distress. Unpaid tax assessment, formal notice of lien filed, public asset clouded. Capital expenditure freeze, executive monopolization. Security upgrades, maintenance, and personnel retention are halted instantly to conserve immediate liquidity. Management focus shifts entirely to survival, creating severe administrative oversight gaps. When an institution faces significant federal or state tax liens, its operational posture shifts entirely from proactive optimization to reactive survival. The capital expenditure freeze. Organizations burdened by liens immediately halt non-essential spending. This means physical access control upgrades are cancelled, broken security cameras are left unrepaired, security guard shifts are scaled back, and critical hardware refreshes are delayed indefinitely. The physical and digital security perimeter degrades in direct proportion to the duration and magnitude of the lien. Executive monopolization. Corporate leadership and legal counsel are forced to focus their attention on structural solvency, asset protection, and negotiating payment plans with revenue services. This strategic preoccupation creates a profound vacuum in daily administrative oversight. Compliance protocols go unreviewed, internal audits are skipped, and unusual operational anomalies pass completely unnoticed by distracted management. UCC-1 filings and asset-backed debt mapping. Under Article 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC, creditors file UCC-1 financing statements with the Secretary of State to publicly declare their secured interest in a debtor's personal property used as collateral. For an analyst, mapping an institution's UCC-1 filings acts as an X-ray of its critical operational dependencies. UCC1 filings detail the exact make, model, serial numbers and quantities of leased or leveraged assets. By systematically extracting this data, an investigator can catalog core technical infrastructure, the precise server racks, enterprise storage arrays, and network routing hardware powering the organization's data centers, along with the identities of the financing companies holding the titles. Logistics and fleet assets, the exact composition of the institution's distribution capabilities, including delivery trucks, freight haulers, and specialized material handling equipment. Manufacturing and production assets, the specific CNC machinery, automation robotics, or chemical processing units driving production lines. If an institution's primary data infrastructure or production machinery is tied to active UCC1 filings with high-interest specialty lenders, it underscores a rigid structural dependence on third-party capital. Cross-referencing these filings with recent court dockets or UCC3 amendments, which signal terminations, assignments, or releases of collateral, indicates whether the company is actively losing access to its foundational operational assets due to default. Corporate filings and registration histories. State corporations divisions, typically managed via the Secretary of State, maintain the chronological regulatory history of an institution's legal existence. Dissecting these repositories requires looking past basic registration data to isolate anomalies in corporate governance. Registered agents and principal office discrepancies. A common indicators of institutional evasion or structural shell gaming is a misalignment between the stated principal place of business and the address of the registered agent. If an institution operating a major industrial facility lists its principal office as a residential property, a P.O. box, or a specialized corporate formation address, such as specific high-density registration zones in Delaware, Wyoming, or Nevada, it signals a deliberate isolation of operational liability from legal service. This structure complicates standard legal recourse and indicates that the corporate leadership resides far from the physical risks of the operations they manage. Executive and director turnover patterns. Annual corporate updates and statements of information must document all changes to the board of directors and executive officers. Evaluating these filings chronologically reveals structural instability. The chronic resignation phenomenon, sudden rolling departures of key executive officers, specifically chief financial officers, CFOs, chief information officers, CIOs, or general counsels, within a short window indicate deep structural friction or impending regulatory exposure. When a CFO abruptly resigns without an immediate, permanent replacement, an internal audit failure or a major liquidity event is frequently developing behind closed doors. Corporate web deconstruction. Institutions frequently create complex webs of parent companies, subsidiaries, and special-purpose vehicles, SPVs, to distribute financial risk, obscure beneficial ownership, or isolate toxic liabilities. By analyzing the signing officers across multiple related corporate entities, an investigator can trace the true lines of command and capital flow, separating disposable operational shells from the actual core holding entities that direct institutional strategy. 2. The compliance audit trail, analyzing regulatory exposure and operational stress. State and federal regulatory frameworks exist to enforce environmental safety, workforce protection, and physical structural integrity. The enforcement mechanisms of agencies like OSHA, the EPA, and municipal code authorities rely heavily on public disclosure databases. When an institution suffers from operational decay, management neglect, or cost-cutting mandates, the failures are catalogued step by step within these compliance databases. Regulatory agency primary, data repository core vulnerability indicators, operational impact/exposure. OSHA Integrated Management Information System, IMIS, /establishment search willful and repeat violations, complaint-driven inspections, lockout/tagout LOTO failures internal whistleblower presence, systemic management bypass of safety protocols, compromised machinery safety. EPA enforcement and compliance history, online ECHO significant noncompliance, SNC status, formal administrative orders, effluent limit exceedances failing waste treatment loops, high financial exposure to remediation mandates, environmental management under acute operational stress, municipal code authority local building and fire marshal inspection registries unresolved egress violations, expired fire suppression certifications, structural degradation notices high physical plant fragility, severely underfunded facilities management, systemic neglect of safety controls, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, database mining. The United States Department of Labor maintains workplace safety records through the OSHA Establishment Search Portal, drawing from the Integrated Management Information System, IMIS, and modern open data platforms. This database provides a window into the physical discipline and operational integrity of an institution's manual operations. Navigating and deconstructing the inspection record. When querying an institution's name or specific facility address, the system returns an inspection history categorized by unique activity numbers. Each entry contains a distinct set of operational metrics that must be thoroughly parsed. Inspection type. The type field indicates why OSHA investigators appeared at the facility. If the inspection type is listed as planned, it represents a routine regulatory check. However, if the type is marked as complaint, it confirms that an insider, an employee, or a labor union formally filed a hazard report. A high concentration of complaint-driven inspections tells an investigator that an active whistleblower ecosystem exists within the facility, signaling deep workplace dissatisfaction and porous internal security. If the type is listed as referral or accident, it indicates a catastrophic physical or systemic failure occurred on site, providing immediate insights into operational vulnerabilities. Violation classification architecture. OSHA categorizes violations based on severity, and each classification carries specific implications for an institution's risk profile. Other than serious, administrative or minor infractions that do not directly threaten life safety, indicating general procedural sloppiness. Serious, infractions where there is a high probability that death or serious physical harm could result, and that the employer knew or should have known of the hazard. This signals a direct breakdown in frontline safety management. Willful, the highest stakes classification. A willful violation indicates that the employer demonstrated either an intentional disregard for the requirements of the OSH Act or plain indifference to employee safety. When an institution is hit with a willful violation, it signals that executive management actively chose to bypass safety rules to preserve production speed or reduce overhead. Repeat occurs when an employer has been cited previously for a substantially similar condition within the past 5 years. A repeat violation proves that the institution's remediation protocols are superficial and that middle management is incapable of or actively resistant to fixing structural operational flaws. Extracting specific technical standard failures. The exact standard cited, referenced by specific OSHA standard numbers, e.g., 29 CFR 1910.147 for lockout/tagout or 29 CFR 1910.119 for process safety management, expose the precise points of physical fragility within a plant. Lockout/tagout (LOTO) deficiencies 1910.147. Systematic violations in LOTO protocols indicate that a facility routinely forces workers to service heavy machinery, electrical systems, or fluid lines without properly isolating the energy sources. This reveals an operational environment that prioritizes uninterrupted production cycles over basic safety compliance. Machinery in these facilities is frequently altered, safety interlocks may be intentionally bypassed, and energy isolation points are poorly mapped or physically compromised. Process safety management, PSM, of highly hazardous chemicals, 1910.119. For chemical plants, refineries, or high-tech manufacturing sites, a failure in PSM compliance indicates a severe risk profile. PSM violations mean the facility's process hazard analyses, PHAs, piping and instrumentation diagrams, P&IDs, or mechanical integrity programs are outdated or completely inaccurate. This marks a facility that is physically fragile, where operators are flying blind with respect to true thermal, chemical, or pressure thresholds within the system. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA Enforcement Data Echo. The EPA's Enforcement and Compliance History, online, ECHO platform aggregates enforcement and compliance data for thousands of regulated facilities across the United States. It provides deep visibility into an institution's adherence to the Clean Air Act, CAA, Clean Water Act, CWA, and Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA. The Significant Noncompliance SNC flag. The single most critical data point within an ECHO report is the presence of a significant noncompliance SNC, or high priority violation, HPV status. An SNC designation is not triggered by minor administrative errors. It is reserved for facilities that cause severe environmental degradation, chronically exceed pollution limits, or completely ignore administrative compliance orders. An active SNC status indicates an institution under immense external pressure. Financial liability and mandated remediation. An SNC designation is almost always accompanied by formal administrative orders, civil penalties, or judicial mandates requiring the immediate overhaul of environmental control systems. These remediation projects demand massive capital injections, draining funds directly from other corporate departments like security, IT infrastructure, and facilities maintenance. Environmental health and safety, EHS stress points. The corporate EHS department under an active SNC mandate operates in a permanent state of crisis management. Staff are entirely consumed by mandatory reporting, regulatory site visits, and scrambling to fix failing environmental infrastructure. This concentrated stress creates a target-rich environment for social engineers or investigators. The EHS and facilities managers are highly reactive, physically exhausted, and prone to administrative lapses. Dissecting effluent limit exceedances via the water pollutant loading tool. By drilling down into the Clean Water Act parameters on ECHO and running queries through the water pollutant loading tool, an investigator can analyze the facility's discharge monitoring reports, DMRs. These reports detail exactly what chemical compounds, heavy metals, or organic wastes the facility is discharging into local water systems, alongside the permitted thresholds. Consistent effluent exceedances, such as unpermitted drops in pH, spikes in total suspended solids, or heavy metal leakage, provide an exact diagnosis of a facility's failing internal infrastructure. It proves that the site's wastewater treatment plants, chemical neutralization loops, or filtration beds are operating well beyond their designed capacity, structurally degraded or completely unserviced. An investigator can pinpoint the exact chemical processing lines that are failing simply by identifying the specific chemical compounds leaking into the effluent stream. Local fire safety and building code violations. While federal databases provide macro-level insights into institutional health, municipal building departments, code enforcement agencies, and local fire marshal registries offer granular, localized intelligence regarding individual physical facilities. Egress, suppression, and alarm system failures. Unresolved municipal code citations provide clear evidence of structural neglect. When mining local code enforcement portals, specific recurring violations indicate an enterprise operating on a compromised survival model. Inoperable fire doors and blocked egress pathways, cited repeatedly in facilities that use space inefficiently or cut corners on warehouse management. This indicates that security perimeters are routinely compromised. Fire doors may be permanently propped open to assist with overloaded logistics or ventilation, and emergency exits are blocked by inventory, creating major physical flow bottlenecks and severe liabilities during an emergency. Expired fire suppression and alarm certifications. A facility operating with expired inspection tags on its commercial sprinkler systems, fire pumps, or main alarm panels is a facility with severely underfunded operations. It indicates that facilities management has ignored mandatory inspection notices, often because they know the underlying physical infrastructure requires a costly overhaul that the corporate budget cannot currently support. Structural and electrical code violations. Citations for exposed wiring, unpermitted electrical modifications, structural roof degradation, or foundational water intrusion point directly to a failing physical plant. These records pinpoint the weakest points of a building's infrastructure. Unpermitted electrical additions often mean that the facility has expanded its technical or power footprint, such as adding server clusters or manufacturing equipment, without upgrading the main electrical service, running the system dangerously close to breaker capacities, and creating a highly volatile environment vulnerable to localized utility failures. 3. Case study, cross-referencing data to expose systemic institutional risk. To demonstrate the analytical power of cross-referencing public records and regulatory compliance data, let us examine a hypothetical investigation of Apex Logistics Solutions Inc., a regional supply chain and warehousing enterprise operating out of a major industrial port facility. The initial data footprint. An investigator begins by querying the local state secretary of state corporate registry and municipal court portals, uncovering a sequence of financial and legal actions within a rolling 90-day window. 1. Secretary of State filings. A corporate amendment reveals that the long-standing Chief Financial Officer, CFO, resigned abruptly on March 2, replaced by an interim Director of Finance from a specialized restructuring consulting firm. 2. Municipal court dockets. 2 separate civil lawsuits appear on the county docket. The first is a breach of contract action filed by Terminus Industrial HVAC Services for $42,000 in unpaid maintenance invoices. The second is an eviction unlawful detainer notice filed by the commercial landlord of Apex's secondary overflow facility, effective in 30 days. 3. Tax lien registries. A search of the county recorder's office uncovers a newly executed state tax lien against Apex Logistics Solutions Inc. for $185,000 due to unpaid unemployment insurance contributions. Layering the compliance audit trail. With a clear financial crisis established through public corporate records, the investigator switches to federal and local regulatory databases to identify how this corporate distress has impacted the physical plant at the port facility. 1. OSHA establishment search. Running the facility's corporate name through the OSHA portal reveals an open inspection categorized as type complaint. The inspection data notes 3 active serious violations under Standard 29 CFR 1910.147, lockout/tagout. The descriptive text outlines that main conveyor systems and automated sorting belts are being repaired while fully energized, driven by management mandates to prevent any operational downtime on the main logistics line. 2. EPA-ECHO database. A query of the facility's environmental tracking numbers reveals that the port site has just been flagged with a significant noncompliance (SNC) status under the Clean Water Act. The detailed facility report shows chronic effluent limit exceedances from their fleet washing bay, leaking unpermitted petroleum hydrocarbons directly into the municipal storm drain system. The EPA has issued an administrative order demanding immediate installation of an industrial oil-water separation system, carrying an estimated capital cost of $110,000. 3. Municipal Fire Marshal Portal. The local fire department's code enforcement database registers an unresolved citation from an inspection conducted 14 days prior. The facility was cited for a completely inoperable primary fire pump servicing the warehouse's automatic sprinkler grid, alongside multiple blocked emergency egress corridors in the primary loading zone. SOS filings, CFO resigns/restructuring firm steps in. Court dockets, HVAC vendor stiffed/oval foul facility evicted. Tax liens, $185 K state lien filed. OSHA, complaint/LOTO bypasses, EPA, CWA noncompliance/$110 K mandate. Conveyors serviced while hot to wastewater loop failing, EHS team completely. Maintain baseline revenue, monopolized by emergency regulatory response. The total vulnerability matrix. Physical plant highly fragile, fire pump broken, egress blocked. Security/maintenance budget completely frozen. Management distracted by existential solvency threats. The analytical synthesis. By systematically linking these public data points, the investigator synthesizes a comprehensive vulnerability matrix for Apex Logistics Solutions Inc., without setting foot on the property. Financial and administrative posture. The enterprise is facing an acute liquidity crisis. The resignation of the CFO and entry of a restructuring specialist prove that the company is actively prioritizing cash conservation to avoid formal insolvency. The unpaid HVAC vendor and the state tax lien show that default is cascading down through operational expenses. Physical facility fragility. Because Apex cannot afford to pay its primary HVAC contractor and is freezing capital to deal with a $185,000 tax lien, it has deferred critical facility repairs. This explains the fire marshal's finding of a broken main fire pump. The facility's primary safety system is compromised, rendering the physical plant highly fragile and vulnerable to catastrophic infrastructure failure. Operational operations and management focus. To maintain baseline revenue and preserve what little liquidity remains, management has forced workers to bypass mandatory safety protocols. This is proven by the OSHA complaint-driven inspection regarding energized conveyor servicing. The operations are running at maximum capacity with zero safety margins. Furthermore, because the EPA has levied an SNC mandate requiring an immediate $110,000 all-water separator installation, the facility's engineering and EHS teams are completely monopolized by emergency regulatory response. Exploitable personnel dynamics. Employees are acutely aware of the company's instability due to the open safety complaints, ongoing corporate contraction, the eviction of the overflow warehouse, and dangerous working conditions on the conveyor lines. Resentment is high, and operational discipline has broken down, as evidenced by the blocked emergency corridors. The workforce is highly vulnerable to external manipulation, social engineering, or operational lapses, while management's attention is entirely consumed by existential legal and financial threats. Part II, Physical Reconnaissance and Site Surveys. Chapter 3, Static Surveillance and the Anonymity Test. Physical red teaming and vulnerability assessments often succeed or fail based on the initial observation phase. Before an operator attempts to cross an institutional perimeter, plug a rogue device into a drop jack, or execute a complex social engineering ruse, they must understand the physical and behavioral environment. This understanding cannot be derived from satellite imagery or corporate press releases. It requires static surveillance. The foundational paradigm of this phase is the anonymity test. This test asks a single question: can you observe the target continuously while remaining an invisible, unremembered variable in the local environment? If your presence alters the baseline behavior of a single security guard, prompts a shopkeeper across the street to look out their window twice, or causes a local resident to note your license plate, you have failed the test. The operation is compromised before it has even begun. Static surveillance is the systematic art of fadding into the background of a physical space to extract actionable, chronological intelligence. It requires treating the human eye, the vehicle, and the observation post not as active tools of insertion, but as passive recorders of institutional rhythm. 1. Mapping the physical rhythm, establishing observation posts and logging the operational cadence. Every facility possesses a unique operational signature, a predictable cycle of inhalation and exhalation driven by human labor, logistical requirements, and administrative routines. A physical plant does not exist in a static state. It is a dynamic process. To exploit this process, you must map its microrhythms over extended windows of time. The theory of the operational signature. An organization's physical rhythm is shaped by its shift structures, security rotations, and supply chain dependencies. These movements create predictable periods of high activity, where security resources are stretched thin and administrative oversight drops, as well as periods of low activity, where any unusual movement sticks out immediately. Mapping this signature allows an analyst to identify operational windows where security systems are most vulnerable to disruption or bypass. 0600 Shift Inbound Phase, Maximum Chaos, High Vehicle Volume Superficial Badge Checks. 1200 Midday Logistics, High Vendor Flow, Loading Docks Open, Frequent Third-Party Arrivals. 1800 Shift Outbound Phase, Employee Exhaustion, Focus shifts outward, exit doors frequently propped. 0200 Deep Nocturnal Cycle, Minimal Footprint, Maximum Contrast, any novel variable is high risk. Selecting and establishing observation posts, OPS. An observation post OP is your primary platform for collecting long-term intelligence. It must provide clear, unobstructed lines of sight to key entry and exit points while protecting you from discovery. OPS generally fall into three categories. 1. Mobile vehicular ops. The most flexible and common platform for static surveillance is a standard passenger vehicle. However, deploying a vehicular op requires strict adherence to local baselines. Vehicle selection. The surveillance vehicle must match the exact demographic footprint of the immediate area. A dented, 10-year-old pickup truck sticks out in a high-end corporate tech park, while a clean, late-model luxury sedan draws immediate attention in an industrial manufacturing district. Rental fleets featuring generic mid-sized SUVs in neutral colors, gray, silver, white, offer the most versatile baseline blending. Positioning logistics. Never park directly in front of the target facility's main gate. A vehicle occupied by a stationary driver for hours is a universal trigger for neighborhood watch groups and private security. Instead, position the vehicle at an angle in adjacent commercial lots, public right-of-ways, or mixed-use street parking, where a parked car is structurally normal. Interior signature reduction. Clear the dashboard of all rental car barcodes, transponders, or personal items. Use deep-tinted rear windows and high-quality sunshades on the front windshield to obscure the occupant's silhouette. If you must use optical gear or low-light cameras, operate exclusively from the rear seat through a cracked window or a small gap in a mesh screen, preventing the telltale reflection of a camera lens from exposing your position. 2. Commercial and public ops. In dense urban or commercial environments, the best op is often a highly trafficked public space. Coffee shops, casual dining establishments, hotel lobbies and public plazas that overlook the target's access vectors provide natural cover for status. The consumption alibi. To maintain a public op for multiple hours, you must maintain a plausible reason to be there. This means purchasing goods, utilizing a laptop or reviewing documents. Your physical posture should mirror that of a distracted remote worker or commuter. Sustaining the position. Rotate positions frequently to avoid drawing the attention of waitstaff or management. Never stay in a single commercial seat for more than 2 hours. If an operation requires 12 hours of continuous coverage from a fixed urban vector, utilize a team rotation where different operators occupy distinct spaces in overlapping shifts. 3. Transient and technical ops. When long-term physical presence is impossible due to tight security or isolated rural geography, you must transition to transient or technical collection options. This involves placing covert, remote optical sensors, such as trail cameras or cellular-enabled microcameras, inside concealment housings within public easements or untracked tree lines facing the target. These systems stream real-time ingress and egress data back to a remote monitoring location without requiring a physical operator on site. Executing the collection phase. Once an op is established, you must log all activity with systematic precision. A standard surveillance log sheet does not just record what happened, it tracks the interplay of time, identity, vehicle signatures, and security posture. Tactical observation execution. 1. Establish baseline demographics prior to op arrival. Conduct a drive-by sweep of the surrounding area to catalogue the predominant vehicle makes, models, occupant demographics, and typical parking durations. Adjust your vehicle and clothing to match this exact profile. 2. Infiltrate the vector and verify ingress. Hour 1. Position your vehicle or public seat at the outer edge of your clear line of sight. Confirm you have an unobstructed view of the target's primary access choke points without appearing directly in their security camera fields of view. 3. Commence continuous chronological logging. Hours 2-6. Log every vehicle arrival, personnel movement, and security action with precise timestamps. Track badge-wearing disciplines, delivery arrivals, and shift handovers, looking for variations across different times of day. 4. Execute cover validation and exit. Hour 6+. Periodically review your immediate surroundings for signs of local curiosity. If any individual makes sustained eye contact or notes your position, immediately execute a pre-planned departure route, discarding any temporary cover materials. The logistical matrix, parameters to track. To build an actionable operational profile, your surveillance log must capture the following specific metrics. Observation variable crucial data points to extract vulnerability link. Shift handovers exact minute security guards swap shifts, physical location of the briefing, length of the handover window, the handover vacuum, During guard transitions, radio traffic spikes, attention drops, and monitoring desks are frequently left understaffed, creating an ideal window for physical bypass. Badge discipline are badges worn prominently on lanyards, clipped to belts or kept in pockets. Do employees scan individually at gates, or do they practice tailgating, social engineering exploits? If employees routinely tailgate through turnstiles during the 0800 rush, a red teamer can easily blend into the crowd carrying a prop or box, bypassing access controls entirely. Guard rotation patterns, frequencies of foot and vehicular patrols, exact routes taken around the perimeter fence, check-in points used by guards, dead space calibration. Mapping patrol routes exposes predictable gaps in coverage where an operator can approach the perimeter out of the line of sight of roving security. Logistics and waste pickups, arrival times of corporate shredding trucks, waste management vehicles, and freight delivery services. Asset exfiltration/ruse entries. Knowing the exact day and hour a shredding truck arrives allows an operator to time a high-vis ruse entry to match the expected corporate routine. 2. The replacing Dave trap, identifying and avoiding high-relationship vendor mimicry. When developing a physical penetration plan, less experienced red teamers often fall into a major psychological trap. They attempt to impersonate a common local service provider. This is known as the replacing Dave trap. The high-relationship vendor paradox. Social engineering theory states that authority, familiarity, and likeness grant access. This often leads operators to look at local service vans visiting a facility, like a local pest control service, a family-owned vending machine supplier, or an independent elevator maintenance technician, and decide to copy them. They buy the matching uniform, paste a magnetic logo on their rental van, and assume they can walk right past the front desk. This approach fails to account for the human factor. In many corporate facilities, industrial plants, and administrative complexes, these localized vendors have been servicing the property for years. The person driving that local truck isn't just an anonymous uniform, he is Dave. The psychological trigger of anomaly. When you step into the role of a high-relationship vendor, you are not slipping past the staff's critical thinking faculties, you are directly challenging them. Security guards, loading dock managers, and receptionists develop strong mental habits around their daily interactions. They know Dave's face, his voice, how he likes his coffee, which sports teams he follows, and how he fills out the visitor log. If an unknown operator shows up in Dave's uniform, it trips an immediate alarm in the staff's minds. 1. The substitution query. The immediate instinctive question from the target staff is, "Where is Dave?" 2. The verification reflex. If the operator responds with a standard cover story, "Dave is out sick today," or "Dave was reassigned to a different route," the receptionist's natural response is to verify this claim. They may call Dave directly on his cell phone, ring the local shop office, or look up the vendor's primary point of contact. 3. Microdeviation detection. Because the target staff is highly familiar with how the real service is performed, they notice any deviation from the standard routine. If the real vendor always enters through loading dock B, but the red teamer approaches the front reception desk, the mismatch instantly breaks the illusion. Methodology for detecting and profiling Daves. To avoid walking into this trap, you must use your static surveillance phase to identify which vendors are high-relationship entities. Use these diagnostic indicators to flag high-risk cover profiles. Personalized interactions. Observe the interaction at the gate or loading dock through binoculars or long lenses. If the security guard smiles, shakes hands, steps out of the booth to chat, or waves a vehicle through without checking an ID card or manifest, that vendor is a high-relationship entity. Mark that uniform profile as restricted. Localized branded assets. Vehicles bearing highly specific, local graphics with 7-digit phone numbers, rather than national corporate numbers, or local address decals generally signify small, family-owned businesses where the workforce is stable and personally known to clients. Irregular or unscheduled ingress. High-relationship vendors often enjoy casual access privileges. They might show up outside of standard delivery hours just to drop off a part or chat with facilities management, a clear sign that their access depends on personal trust rather than strict corporate protocols. 3. Parsing the vendor ecosystem, exploiting faceless, high-turnover corporate contractors. To bypass an institutional perimeter via social engineering or a physical ruse, you must look for the opposite of Dave. You want to identify and exploit faceless, high-turnover corporate contractors. These entities operate within the target's environment every day, but they are completely anonymous. They are defined entirely by their uniform, their corporate vehicle, and the clipboards or tablets they carry. The staff at the target facility does not see the individual person, they see a functional utility. The mechanics of institutional blindness. Large institutions manage their facilities through massive service contracts with national corporations. These corporate vendors experience high employee turnover, complex scheduling rotations, and constant structural reorganization. Consequently, the team at the target facility expects to see a new face in that uniform every few weeks. This operational reality creates institutional blindness. The security infrastructure shifts its trust from the person to the brand asset. If an individual arrives in a precisely detailed national contractor uniform, driving a matching vehicle with standard commercial markings, carrying a professional digital interface or clipboard, the security guard's brain uses a cognitive shortcut. Uniform plus clipboard equals legitimacy. High-value faceless vendor profiles. Static surveillance should focus heavily on cataloging the national corporate entities that routinely access the target's property. The most effective profiles generally fall into 4 categories. 1. Facility uniform and mat services, e.g., Cintas, Aramark, UniFirst. These vendors represent the gold standard for faceless ruse entries. They are ubiquitous, highly systemized, and enjoy extensive access throughout a facility. Operational footprint. Uniform delivery drivers typically visit a facility on a fixed weekly schedule. They enter through loading docks, service bays, or secondary employee entrances. Once inside, they move freely through the property to swap out floor mats, restock restroom supplies, or collect soiled coveralls from locker rooms. The security blind spot. Because these deliveries are repetitive and low risk, dock managers and security guards rarely check their credentials. The driver is often buzzed through secondary security doors without a second glance, allowing an operator to move deep within the facility's interior footprint unchallenged. 2. National HVAC and building automation subcontractors, e.g. MCOR Comfort Systems, Johnson Controls. Building management systems, BMS, climate control infrastructure, and industrial refrigeration loops require constant maintenance, calibration, and emergency service. Operational footprint. Technicians travel in highly standardized corporate utility vans loaded with specialized gear, ladders, and diagnostic cases. They are brought in to address specific environmental faults, software bugs in the HVAC controllers, or routine quarterly compliance checks. The security blind spot. HVAC technicians are expected to look for infrastructure problems, meaning they have a natural excuse to wander around the property. A technician can walk through corporate offices, mechanical rooms, server room corridors, and roof decks looking for air handlers or zone valves. If challenged in a sensitive hallway, a simple response like "I'm tracing a fault in the variable air volume box for this floor" is usually enough to shut down further questioning. HVAC technician ruse entry. Access to critical infrastructure. Physical access, server rooms, tactical misdirection. Technicians routinely service in-row cooling any anomalous presence in sensitive areas. Units granting a clean path to internal network racks is dismissed as a technician tracking a fault line. 3. Telecom, fiber and utility subcontractors, e.g. national field service contractors. Telecom providers frequently use third-party field contractors to run new lines, service demarc hubs, or audit external fiber vaults. Operational footprint. These workers wear generic safety gear, high-visibility vests, hard hats, safety glasses, and carry tool belts. They typically drive clean utility vehicles equipped with amber warning lights and basic commercial safety markings. The security blind spot. Utility workers operate primarily in dead spaces, basements, exterior perimeters, mechanical shafts, and telecom closets, IDF/MDF rooms. Because their work is messy and complex, staff naturally avoid them. This allows an operator to spend hours inside a core telecommunications hub undisturbed, providing ample time to plant inline network implants or tap communication lines. 4. Armored transport and high-value logistics, e.g. Brinks, Loomis, Garda World. While armored car guards face rigorous safety protocols, the timing and mechanics of their arrivals are highly predictable. Operational footprint. Guards operate in pairs under tight time constraints, moving along fixed routes between their armored vehicle and the facility's cache room or main administrative vault. The security blind spot. Security personnel are trained to cooperate with armored transport guards to avoid delaying their route. While an operator should rarely attempt to directly impersonate an armed guard due to the extreme legal and safety risks, observing their arrival times allows a red teamer to exploit the facility's response patterns. During a cache drop, internal security guards are often distracted, monitoring cameras are trained on the transport vehicle, and main access corridors are opened up, creating peripheral blind spots elsewhere in the building. Bypassing the verification loop via corporate apathy. The critical difference between a high-relationship vendor and a faceless corporate contractor lies in how staff handle verification failures. If a receptionist notices a problem with a faceless vendor's paperwork, their response is rarely to call the vendor's CEO or launch a deep investigation. Instead, they default to corporate apathy. If an operator posing as a national HVAC technician arrives at a facility and the front desk clerk states, "I don't see you on our schedule today," a high-relationship cover story would collapse, but a faceless corporate contractor can easily exploit the system's built-in friction. The apathy lever. "Yeah, our dispatch team is completely disorganized since the software update last week. They sent me out on an emergency ticket for a cooling issue in your main data room. I've got the work order number right here on my tablet. If you want me to pack up and head to my next call, I can, but your data room might overheat before dispatch fixes the scheduling bug. Do you want to sign me in, or should I tell my manager you turn me away?" Presented with this scenario, the clerk faces a choice: take the initiative to trace an elusive scheduling error across a massive corporate bureaucracy, or sign the technician in to avoid taking the blame for an infrastructure failure. In the vast majority of corporate environments, the clerk will choose the path of least resistance. They will sign the visitor log, hand over a temporary badge, and return to their routine, allowing the anonymity test to work exactly as intended. Chapter 3: Synthesized Field Exercise, the Vendor Analysis. To apply these principles, consider a physical red team assignment targeting a secure research facility operated by Omni-Tech Engineering Labs. The objective is to identify an exterior or peripheral operational rhythm that allows an operator to bypass the main security checkpoint at the loading dock. Phase 1: Static Surveillance and Rhythm Mapping. The surveillance team establishes a mobile observation post in an office park across the street from Omni-Tech's main shipping and receiving terminal. Over a 5-day monitoring window, the team logs the following activities. 07:30 Security handover. The night shift guard rotates out. The morning guard spends 15 minutes checking the inventory log, during which time the main loading dock gate is left unattended. 08:15 Corporate mat service. A local textile delivery van, Tri-County Linen Services, arrives every Tuesday. The driver, an older man in a blue uniform, walks into the guard shack, pours a cup of coffee, exchanges a clipboard with the guard, and chats for 10 minutes before unloading his van. 10:45 Courier deliveries. Multiple national couriers, FedEx, UPS, arrive in rapid succession. The guards scan their badges quickly and wave them through without inspecting the interior of the delivery trucks. 13:20 Industrial Uniform Service. A national corporate uniform service truck, Sinters, arrives every Thursday. The driver changes frequently. Over 3 Thursdays, 3 different drivers operate the route. The guards perform a basic manifest check but do not engage in personal conversation. Phase 2: Analyzing the vulnerabilities. Reviewing the compiled data reveals 2 distinct paths, each carrying a completely different risk profile. 1. The Tri-County Linen Vector. This is a classic replacing Dave trap. The driver is deeply embedded in the facility's social environment. Attempting to copy this uniform or vehicle profile would be highly dangerous. The security guard would instantly notice a new face and start asking questions, ending the ruse before the operator could cross the threshold. 2. The National Uniform Service Vector. This is the optimal exploitation profile. The high turnover among the delivery drivers proves that Omni-Tech's security team is accustomed to seeing unfamiliar faces in that uniform. The guards rely entirely on the brand asset and standard paperwork to verify identity, rather than personal recognition. Phase 3. Operational Execution Strategy. The Red Team selects the National Uniform Service profile for their insertion plan. The operator procures a standard-issue corporate uniform, prepares a digital manifest on a mobile tablet matching the target's formatting style, and rents a generic white utility van. The operator times their arrival for a Thursday at 13:15, executing the entry precisely within the target's established operational window. Because the security guard's cognitive baseline is primed to expect an anonymous contractor at that exact hour, the insertion proceeds smoothly. Operator arrives in corporate uniform at 13:15. Guard access check, evaluates brand and paperwork. Cognitive match, matches expected weekly pattern. Result, seamless perimeter bypass via institutional blindness. The guard scans the tablet's simulated barcode, issues a visitor pass without asking for identification, and grants the operator unescorted access to the facility's interior logistics corridors. By mastering static surveillance and applying the anonymity test, the team transforms a secure perimeter into an open doorway. Chapter 4. Pattern of Life POL Tracking. Static surveillance and public compliance audits reveal an organization's physical and administrative boundaries, but they do not capture its real-time operational state. An institution's actual security posture is defined by human behavior, the daily movements, habits, and technical interactions of the personnel who hold privileged access. Pattern of Life POL tracking is the systematic collection, cross-referencing, and analysis of a target. Physical movements, digital signatures, and social routines over time. While an enterprise can install biometric access gates, firewalls, and encrypted communication channels, it cannot easily alter the biological and psychological tendencies of its workforce. People follow predictable paths. They seek convenience, form routines under stress, and drop their technical defenses the moment they step outside the corporate perimeter. By mapping these human patterns and linking them directly to digital network events, an analyst can bridge the gap between physical space and cyber architecture, uncovering high-value access points that remain completely invisible on standard network topology maps. 1. Isolating the human hubs, mapping routines, off-site habits, and human vulnerabilities. In any organization, authority on paper rarely mirrors access in practice. Organizational charts highlight executives, directors, and department heads, individuals who are heavily guarded, highly trained in risk management, and subjected to continuous security monitoring. However, the operational baseline of a facility is maintained by human hubs, mid-level personnel who possess broad access to physical and digital infrastructure, but lack the elevated security protection afforded to the executive suite. Target identification, the connector paradigm. When selecting targets for POL tracking, focus on roles that combine three distinct operational traits: broad physical movement, elevated network credentials, and routine off-site exposure. Executive assistants, EAs. EAs manage schedules, hold master physical keys or elevated access badges, handle unencrypted executive correspondence, and routinely manage personal errands outside the perimeter. Senior systems administrators/database engineers. These individuals hold full administrative access to enterprise backbones, often carry hardware tokens or corporate laptops off-site, and routinely work long, irregular hours that induce cognitive fatigue. Facilities and HVAC operations managers. Facilities personnel possess unrestricted physical access to every mechanical room, server closet, cabling riser, and utility vault across the enterprise. They regularly interface with external vendors and spend significant parts of their workday off-site sourcing equipment or managing remote sites. Third-party on-site MSSP contractors. Managed Security Service Provider MSSP analysts embedded within a facility often retain elevated diagnostic privileges while operating outside the target's core corporate culture, making them ideal vectors for social engineering. Mapping physical trajectories and off-site habits. Once a primary target is identified, physical surveillance shifts from observing the facility to profiling the individual's daily movements. Human beings are creatures of efficiency. They choose specific routes, coffee shops, lunch venues, and transit options based on convenience and stress relief. 07:15 residence ingress, route selection, deterministic vehicular path via Highway 101. 07:45 off-site transit stop, the buffer zone, local coffee shop 0.5 miles from facility. 12:15 lunch routine, social friction point, mid-tier restaurant, badge remains worn exposed on lanyard. 17:45 post-work decompression, emotional vulnerability zone, local gym/bar, open digital chatter. The morning buffer zoned. Target personnel frequently utilize an off-site commercial location, typically a coffee shop or fast casual breakfast spot within a 2-mile radius of the facility, to mentally transition into the workday. Behavioral profile. During this 15 to 30-minute window, targets routinely review daily agendas on corporate smartphones, process overnight emails, and stage work materials. Security decay. Because they are outside the workplace, targets drop their physical awareness. They routinely leave corporate-issued laptops logged in while stepping away to pick up orders, wear unshielded RFID access badges visibly around their necks or clipped to belts, and conduct sensitive phone calls regarding internal technical issues within clear hearing range of surrounding tables. Off-site lunch patterns and social dynamics. The midday break represents a critical window of security relaxation. Tracking a target's lunch habits reveals key interpersonal networks and informal communications. Solitary versus group behavior. Solitary diners frequently interact with personal mobile devices, personal laptops, or public Wi-Fi networks, creating opportunities for technical signal capture. Group diners engage in unmonitored work discussions, airing grievances regarding management decisions, internal system failures, software migrations, or organizational disputes. Vendor interactivity. Pay close attention to targets meeting third-party individuals for lunch. These meetings often reveal undisclosed vendor relationships, sales pitches for upcoming software-hardware integrations, or informal consulting work, highlighting new technical vectors entering the facility. Post-work decompression vectors. The 2-hour window immediately following a shift exhibits the highest concentration of emotional and behavioral vulnerability. Personnel dealing with high workplace stress seek immediate outlets, whether at local gyms, taverns, or during commute routines. Alcohol-induced loose lips. Targets visiting local bars near major corporate or defense sites routinely speak freely about internal frustrations. Alcohol lowers cognitive operational security filters, making targets receptive to simple conversational rapport building from seemingly neutral strangers. Commute patterns. Mapping whether a target uses public transit, ride-sharing platforms, or personal vehicles reveals specific technical vectors. A target using commuter rail presents a static target for close-quarters wireless sniffing, shoulder surfing, or badge cloning for up to an hour daily. Identifying psychological and emotional vulnerabilities. Physical surveillance does not merely catalog coordinates, it decodes psychological state. By observing a target's micro-behaviors over a 2-week window, an analyst can assess 4 primary psychological vulnerabilities. Vulnerability type, physical and behavioral indicators, exploitation vector. Cognitive burnout/fatigue, slumped posture, bloodshot eyes, irregular hours, rushing through physical entry checks, abandoning basic lock security checks. Ruse interruption. Highly fatigued targets accept plausible administrative interruptions or security bypass, request simply to clear tasks quickly. Professional friction/resentment, open venting to colleagues outside the facility, aggressive body language when discussing management, working late without recognition. Ego validation/whistleblower ruse, approaching the target under the guise of an industry recruiter or sympathetic peer to extract technical details. Routine predictability, arriving, eating, walking, and departing at the exact same minute every day down to the second. Total adherence to habit, timing attacks, precision interception, physical asset swap, or seamless tailgating planned around their exact arrival timeline. Physical security negligence, leaving access badges in vehicles, keeping credentials in unshielded pockets, leaving sensitive documents exposed in cars, passive credential harvesting, long-range RFID cloning, physical theft, or document photographing via surveillance lenses. 2. The technical-physical bridge, correlating digital patterns with physical movement. physical surveillance tracks where a body moves, technical surveillance tracks where a device broadcasts. The technical physical bridge is the analytical framework that merges these two data streams into a single operational matrix. Modern mobile devices, corporate laptops, wearables, and smart vehicles constantly emit radio frequency, RF signatures. These signals do not stop at the physical walls of a corporate facility. By placing passive technical collection sensors around a target's physical path, an analyst can correlate RF emissions with physical movements, mapping internal network layout zones without ever establishing a connection to the target's enterprise network. RF and digital footprints in motion. Every modern device carried by a target leaks unique identifiers that act as digital beacons. These emissions can be captured, catalogued, and linked directly to an individual through passive monitoring. Wi-Fi probe requests. Even when a smartphone or laptop is not connected to a Wi-Fi network, its wireless interface continuously broadcasts probe requests seeking previously connected access points, SSIDs. The unique identifier, probe requests contain the device's permanent media access control, MAC, address unless randomized, though many enterprise devices use sticky MAC configurations when paired with corporate management profiles, or reveal a distinct list of historic network names, e.g. Home Network Smith, Corporate Guest 5G, Executive Jet WLAN. Physical tracking, by deploying low-cost passive Wi-Fi sniffers, such as directional single-board computers running packet capture tools, along a target's physical path, e.g. parking garage, public walkway, coffee shop, you can log every instance where the target's device passes a sensor. This provides a digital timestamp for every physical movement. Bluetooth Low Energy (BLE) advertisements. Smartwatches, fitness bands, wireless headphones, and corporate asset tags continuously broadcast BLE advertisement packets to maintain ecosystem connectivity. Static BLE identifiers. Unlike smartphones that periodically randomize MAC addresses, many peripheral devices, especially high-end headsets, smart rings, and medical fitness monitors, emit static or predictably rotating UUIDs, universally unique identifiers. Precision proximity mapping. Because BLE signals have a shorter range than Wi-Fi, typically 10 to 30 meters, a BLE signal detection confirms the target's physical presence within a precise radius. If a target steps out of a facility for a smoke break or phone call, a BLE receiver hidden near the exit vector instantly registers the target's physical presence. Spatialogical network zone inference. By monitoring signal changes as a target moves into and out of a physical facility, an analyst can map the internal network geometry from the outside. Target approaches gate. Device broadcasts probe requests for internal corporate SSIDs. Target enters core, external Wi-Fi drops, cellular private LTE handoff registers. Target enters vault, total signal attenuation, Faraday effect confirms RF shielded zone. Mapping security enclaves via signal attenuation. Different zones within a corporate facility feature different structural and electromagnetic profiles. Standard office zones allow clear transmission of cellular signals to 4 GHz/5 GHz Wi-Fi and BLE through standard windows and drywall. Data centers and server closets, characterized by heavy concrete, metallic raised flooring, and high electrical noise from server power supplies. When a target enters these zones, their mobile device's signal strength drops precipitously or disconnects entirely from public cellular networks, switching to internal Wi-Fi calling infrastructure. Sensitive compartmented information facilities, SCIFs/vaults, shielded with copper mesh or metallic foil to prevent RF leakage. When a high-value target enters a SCIF or secure vault, their digital signature vanishes entirely from all RF monitoring spectrums instantly. By logging the exact time a target's mobile signals disappear and reappear relative to their observed physical position through external windows or access doors, an analyst can map the precise physical boundaries of secure enclaves within the building layout. Temporal traffic burst correlation. When a system administrator or network engineer executes critical administrative tasks, their actions generate distinct network traffic spikes. Correlating these technical spikes with observed physical movements reveals the layout of an enterprise network's control architecture. The physical trigger, technical effect loop. Consider a target who is the lead network engineer for an industrial facility. Physical observation confirms the target enters a specific secondary facility door at 14:10:00. 14:10:00. Physical ingress target badges into secondary annex door B. 14:11:30. Physical movement target enters third floor wiring closet. 14:12:05. Technical event external monitoring registers a high bandwidth burst of encrypted SSH traffic traversing the perimeter router. By cross-referencing this timeline over multiple days, the analyst establishes an operational identity. Target ingress to Annex Door B directly triggers Administrative Command Line Interface, CLI sessions on core routing switches. The physical location visited by the target at 14:11:30 is positively identified as a primary network distribution hub holding core management consoles. Constructing the integrated signal movement matrix. To operationalize this technical physical data, construct a structured timeline log that aligns physical observations with digital signal collection. Technical protocol, cross-domain mapping. 1. Capture baseline RF profile, Phase 1, baseline signal cataloging. Establish a static RF sniffer near the target's off-site buffer zone, e.g., coffee shop. Log all Wi-Fi probe requests, MAC addresses, and BLE UUIDs emitted when the target is physically isolated from surrounding crowds to isolate their unique hardware identifiers. 2. Deploy synchronized perimeter sensors, Phase 2, perimeter deployment. Position passive RF logging nodes around the physical perimeter of the target facility, targeting primary access gates, loading docks, and exterior courtyard areas. Ensure all nodes are time-synchronized via UTC-NTP down to the millisecond. 3. Execute synchronized physical RF tracking, Phase 3, physical digital alignment. Maintain physical surveillance on the target while active on the perimeter. Record physical milestones, e.g., target opens door to North Annex at 10:14:22, and cross-reference these timestamps against captured RF logs from the perimeter nodes. 4. Synthesize integrated topology map, Phase 4, matrix synthesis and topology mapping. Correlate the physical timestamps, RF signal disappearances, and external network traffic bursts to plot internal security zones, administrative hubs, and vulnerable off-site communication windows. 3. Case study, Operation Meridian Synthesis. To demonstrate the power of pattern-of-life tracking, let us examine a hypothetical red team assessment targeting Meridian Energy Systems, a company operating an off-grid industrial control center managing regional power distribution. The target facility is a fortified, windowless building featuring biometric access controls, armed guards, and air-gapped internal operational technology, OT networks. The analytical objective. Because direct physical entry through the guarded turnstiles was impossible, and the internal OT network lacked external internet connectivity, the team had to identify a bridge point, a human vector whose daily routines created a temporary physical or digital tunnel between the secure internal core and the outside world. Target selection and POL mapping. Through initial surveillance, the team identified Marcus Vance, the Senior Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition (SCADA) integration engineer. Vance was responsible for maintaining the physical controllers regulating power distribution loops. Physical trajectory logging. Over a 10-day observation period, the team mapped Vance's daily pattern of life. 06:45 EDT arrives at Fitness First Gym, located 1.2 miles from the Meridian facility. 07:40 EDT exits the gym, drives to Harbour Coffee drive-thru, purchases breakfast and parks his vehicle in the rear lot of the coffee shop. 07:45:08 10 EDT the buffer window, sits in his parked car, opens an encrypted corporate tablet, and reviews system logs via a private cellular APN connection before driving the final mile to work. 12:30 EDT leaves the secure facility on foot to walk through a public municipal park adjacent to the site, carrying a personal smartphone and wearing his corporate lanyard around his neck. 18:15 EDT departs work, driving directly to an off-site technical community college where he teaches an evening electrical engineering course twice weekly. Executing the technical physical correlation, the team deployed technical collection assets to map Vance's digital footprint during his physical routines. 1 Offsite buffer window 0745 EDT. Using a passive RF receiver in an adjacent vehicle at the coffee shop, the team logged Vance's corporate tablet broadcasting high-frequency cellular data bursts on a private LTE spectrum, paired simultaneously via Bluetooth to a high-end wireless noise-cancelling headset. 2 The midday park routine 12:30 EDT. As Vance walked through the public park, a team member carrying a hidden long-range 13.56 MHz RFID reader passed within 3 feet of him. The reader captured the unshielded high-frequency credential stored on his corporate access badge hanging from his lanyard. 3 Correlating physical handoffs. The team observed that when Vance arrived at the facility at 08:15 EDT, his headset BLE signature, Vance Headset Pro, remained active as he walked from his car to the main loading dock door, not the employee entrance. At 08:18 EDT, the headset signature vanished instantly as he stepped inside, indicating he was passing through an electromagnetically shielded airlock or interior double-door system. Identifying the operational break. Cross-referencing Vance's physical movements with his digital emissions uncovered a major operational gap. The unmonitored maintenance tunnel. Vance used the loading dock entrance at 08:15 EDT instead of the main lobby turnstiles because he routinely brought a heavy, ruggedized diagnostic laptop case from his vehicle directly into the OT engineering suite. The credential vacuum. To make carrying the heavy case easier, Vance routinely pre-scanned his badge at the outer loading dock proximity reader, then used his foot to prop the heavy hydraulic security door open for 15 seconds while grabbing his gear from a staging cart. Vance arrives at loading dock, scans cloned badge, props door open 15 seconds. Exploitation window CREATED. Physical entry achievable without biometric check or guard intervention. The exploitation synthesis. By executing pattern-of-life tracking, the Red Team bypassed the primary physical guards and the air-gapped network defenses without firing a single exploit payload or triggering an alarm. 1 Credential acquisition. The team duplicated Vance's RFID access credential using the data captured during his midday park walk. 2 Timing calibration. Using the BLE signal of his headset as an automated early warning beacon, an operator staged in a vehicle near the loading dock registered Vance's arrival at 08:14 EDT. 3 Perimeter insertion. As Vance scanned his badge and propped the loading dock door open to retrieve his diagnostic case, an operator dressed in a national contractor uniform walked up behind him, grabbed the door handle to assist with the heavy load, and stepped cleanly inside the physical perimeter past the biometric controls. The air gap was bridged, the biometric security was bypassed, and the physical perimeter was breached, all achieved by identifying, tracking, and exploiting the predictable daily rhythm of a single human hub. Part III, the informational synthesis targeting friction. Chapter 5, Designing the Informal Power Map. An enterprise does not operate according to its official organizational chart. Corporate hierarchies, executive titles, and published management trees are public relations instruments designed to satisfy board members, attract investors, and provide liability shields for senior leadership. They represent administrative fantasy. In practice, institutions are decentralized, organic ecosystems driven by personal networks, historical leverage, technical reliance, and internal resource competition. Information and authority do not flow down tidy vertical chains of command. They pool in informal hubs, bypass formal approvals through back-channel relationships, and stall at administrative bottlenecks controlled by unlisted gatekeepers. For the Red Team operator or intelligence analyst, relying on an official org chart to plan an intervention, social engineering campaign, or physical breach leads to wasted effort. To manipulate an institution, you must look past its painted facade and draft its informal power map, a high-resolution blueprint of the real hubs of operational influence, data control, and internal friction. 1. The org chart deception, mapping the informal power topology. The formal org chart dictates who holds nominal accountability, but the informal power map identifies who holds functional capability. A Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, may nominally oversee enterprise data protection, but the lead database administrator, DBA, who has spent 11 years configuring legacy server clusters, holds the master keys, understands every unpatched workaround, and routinely bypasses CISO directives to maintain system uptime. The failure vectors of formal hierarchies, relying on official corporate structures, exposes an operation to distinct failure modes. The executive isolation trap. Executives are shielded by multiple layers of administrative screening, security protocols, and strict identity verification. Targeting them directly yields high visibility and low success rates. Furthermore, executives rarely possess granular technical knowledge or immediate physical access to critical infrastructure. They authorize actions, but they do not execute them. The title illusion. Corporate titles are frequently inflated for retention or external sales purposes. A director of cybersecurity at a mid-tier firm may be a solo manager overseeing outsourced vendors with zero direct system access, while a junior operations analyst might hold unmonitored global root access across the entire cloud tenant. Shadow authority disregard. Official charts fail to account for long-tenured employees, executive assistants, senior facilities technicians, and principal engineers who derive power not from rank, but from institutional memory and technical indispensability. Harvesting OSINT to map shadow topologies. Building an informal power map requires harvesting disparate open-source intelligence, OSINT, and synthesizing it to reveal actual workflows, data flows, and dependencies. One code repositories and technical communities. Public code repositories, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and technical Q&A platforms, Stack Overflow, Server Fault, offer direct insight into shadow technical authorities. Commit histories and pull requests. Analyzing commit frequencies, code reviews, and author tags reveals who actually maintains core infrastructure. Look for engineers who approve emergency patches outside standard change management windows or maintain personal forks of enterprise code. Configuration leakage. Developers routinely ask technical questions on public forums using corporate email handles or unique usernames, exposing internal IP addresses, software versions, database structures, and internal server naming conventions. Identifying the individual asking how to bypass a specific firewall or patch a legacy database pinpoints the employee struggling with internal technical friction. 2. Procurement and vendor footprints. RFPs, requests for proposals, public municipal procurement records, and vendor case studies reveal who holds purchasing and implementation authority. Vendor testimonials. Third-party technology vendors frequently publish case studies featuring quotes from target personnel. A quote like, "Thanks to Software X, our team reduced deployment time by 80%, identifies the exact employee who spearheaded that software integration, along with their functional domain and software access. Public licensing and domain registrations. Searching WHOIS histories, SSL/TLS certificate transparency logs, and domain registration databases reveals the names, personal email addresses, and direct phone numbers of the technical contacts who manage an organization's digital assets. 3. Social footprints and professional networks. Social platforms, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Indeed, X, provide raw structural data that, when aggregated, exposes operational reality. Job descriptions as technical blueprints. Hiring postings authored by middle managers detail the exact software stacks, physical hardware models, security tools, and administrative gaps within a department. A job posting listing requires experience managing legacy Windows Server 2012 clusters with no vendor support, confirms technical fragility. Endorsement and connection aggregation. On professional platforms, mapping mutual endorsement clusters between departments reveals cross-functional reliance. If 5 senior software engineers consistently endorse a mid-level infrastructure specialist for emergency disaster recovery, that specialist is an informal technical hub. Glassdoor Indeed reviews. Grievance posts from former employees name specific middle managers, outline internal operational bottlenecks, and identify chronic friction between competing departments, e.g., engineering versus sales or operations versus compliance. Formal versus informal topology matrix. Metric/dimension, formal corporate hierarchy, informal power topology. Primary driver, administrative structure and legal accountability, operational necessity, technical dependency and personal trust. Data flow, vertical, standardized, audited reporting chains, lateral, unmonitored back channels and informal communication. Key vulnerability, high visibility, heavily guarded at senior levels, high access, low monitoring, often unaware of their leverage. Change frequency, slow, requires board or executive approval, dynamic, shifts with project cycles, attrition and burnout. Access control, governed by role-based access control, RBAC, governed by administrative creep, legacy permissions and shared credentials. 2. Isolating internal rivals, the earner and the gatekeeper. Every institution is an alliance of competing internal factions. The most fundamental, recurring, and exploitable structural conflict inside any operational enterprise exists between two distinct operational profiles, the earner and the gatekeeper. These two archetypes exist in a state of permanent structural friction. By identifying, profiling, and isolating an earner-gatekeeper pair within a target institution, an analyst can position themselves in the gap between them, utilizing the earner's drive for speed to bypass the gatekeeper's security controls, or leveraging the gatekeeper's paranoia to create internal operational chaos. Profile architecture, the earner. The earner is the primary revenue generator or project deliverer for the institution. They operate in high-pressure environments where metrics, speed, and volume dictate success. Operational mindset, output over process. The earner views administrative procedures, security compliance checks, and formal sign-offs as bureaucratic obstacles designed by non-producers to justify their existence. Key characteristics. O holds significant operational budget authority or controls core production lines. O exhibits low patience for formal IT ticketing systems, security audits, or physical access controls. O routinely implements shadow IT solutions, e.g., unauthorized cloud storage, unvetted third-party SaaS platforms, local access overrides, to bypass operational bottlenecks. O highly responsive to external communications that offer rapid solutions, accelerated deal closures, or immediate problem resolution. Identification markers, high-volume sales VPs, product leads pushing critical software launches, plant managers evaluated on unit throughput, or trading desk directors. Profile architecture, the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper is responsible for risk management, compliance, legal exposure, and security enforcement. They operate in environments where a single failure carries catastrophic career or legal consequences. Operational mindset, control over velocity. The gatekeeper views every unauthorized change, undocumented exception, and rushed deadline as a potential audit failure, security breach, or legal liability. Key characteristics. O holds absolute or partial veto power over operational deployments, physical site access, and vendor onboardings. O obsessed with paper trails, formal sign-offs, regulatory frameworks, SOC 2, ISO, OSHA, HIPAA, and chain of custody documentation. O deeply suspicious of unannounced changes, sudden policy exceptions, and aggressive demands for rapid access. O highly protective of their personal authority and terrified of being blamed for an operational failure or compliance breach. Identification markers, CISOs, legal counsels, compliance officers, quality assurance, QA directors, physical security chiefs, or risk management auditors. Intelligence processing protocol, exploiting rival dynamics. 1. Collect departmental friction indicators, Phase 1, harvesting conflict data. Mine OSINT data streams, job reviews, public meeting minutes, historical vendor disputes, and employee social chatter, to identify organizational units experiencing schedule slip, budget disputes, or recent audit failures. Look specifically for public friction between sales engineering and legal compliance. 2. Isolate the specific earner-gatekeeper pair, Phase 2, entity profiling. Identify the specific leadership pairing governing the targeted operational unit. Map the earner, e.g., VP of Global Sales, against the corresponding gatekeeper, e.g., Director of Data Compliance. Document their personal identities, career histories, tenure overlap, and direct communication vectors. 3. Pinpoint the operational wedge issue. Phase 3. Friction vector identification. Analyze current corporate initiatives to find the active point of friction between the pair. Examples include an impending product release date, an upcoming regulatory audit, an unapproved software migration, or a physical facility expansion project constrained by safety approvals. 4. Construct the interception ruse. Phase 4. Synthesis and wedge execution. Design a social engineering or physical entry payload that offers the earner an immediate, unmonitored bypass to resolve their operational bottleneck, while framing the bypass as an action already authorized or demanded by the gatekeeper, or vice versa. Exploitation mechanics, leveraging the wedge. Once an earner-gatekeeper pair is identified and their specific friction vector is mapped, the analyst can deploy targeted tactical ruses that exploit their mutual distrust. 1. The authorized preemption ruse targeting the earner. Approach the earner impersonating an external consultant, auditor, or specialized technical vendor. Present them with a solution to their immediate operational bottleneck, e.g., we have the pre-approved emergency access patch for your data pipeline. Frame the intervention as a directive ordered by senior executive leadership to bypass the gatekeeper's standard 3-week review process to hit an immediate deadline. Because the earner despises the gatekeeper's delays, they will accept the bypass without verifying it with the gatekeeper. 2. The compliance audit lever targeting the gatekeeper. Approach the gatekeeper impersonating a regulatory authority, insurer, or third-party auditor. Present them with evidence of an unauthorized, shadow IT system or safety bypass executed by the earner. The gatekeeper's paranoia will drive them to demand immediate, elevated access to the earner's systems or physical spaces to conduct an emergency audit, unwittingly acting as a proxy or granting physical escort to the red team operator. 3. Identifying universal overhead, exploiting institutional mandates. No organization, regardless of its financial resources or private status, operates with total autonomy. Every enterprise is bound by universal overhead, the mandatory non-negotiable structural burdens imposed by external legal, financial, insurance, and technical regulatory bodies. Universal overhead represents a critical target vector because it forces the institution to interact with third-party entities, adhere to rigid external timelines, and open its physical and digital perimeters to outside inspectors, auditors, and contractors. The organization cannot say no to these interactions. They represent mandatory perimeter openings. The 3 pillars of universal overhead. 1. Insurance underwriting and risk assessments. Commercial property, casualty, cyber liability, and executive protection insurance policies require continuous verification. Insurance underwriters do not take an institution's word regarding its risk posture. They demand documentation, physical site surveys, and technical vulnerability scans. Vulnerability vector. Insurance surveys occur on fixed annual or semi-annual schedules. During an active underwriting review, the target institution is forced to provide extensive data regarding physical security controls, structural engineering specs, fire suppression tags, cybersecurity architecture, and disaster recovery plans. Operational exploitation. Impersonating a commercial insurance risk engineer or cyber liability underwriter provides a bulletproof pretext for requesting high-level architectural documentation, physical site walkthroughs, and technical configuration details. Institutions comply rapidly with insurance requests because failure to satisfy the underwriter results in immediate policy cancellation or massive premium increases. 2. Legal and regulatory compliance. State, federal, and international regulatory frameworks, OSHA, EPA, SEC, GDPR, HIPAA, FINRA, mandate continuous compliance reporting and periodic physical inspections. Vulnerability vector. Compliance regulations carry statutory penalties, criminal liabilities, and operational shutdown powers. Consequently, when an individual claiming regulatory oversight authority presents themselves, the institution's standard security screening protocols stall. Staff are conditioned to defer to regulatory inspectors to avoid triggering fines or administrative retaliation. Operational exploitation. Regulatory mandates can be weaponized to force physical access or technical disclosures. A ruse centered on an unannounced OSHA workplace safety inspection or an urgent EPA hazardous material audit forces facilities managers to unlock mechanical rooms, basement utility spaces, industrial processing areas, and secondary access corridors without standard advanced badge processing. 3. IT security and data privacy standards. Frameworks like SOC 2, ISO IEC 27001, PCI-DSS, and NIST SB 853 require organizations to undergo rigorous third-party audits to maintain commercial contracts. Vulnerability vector. Compliance with these frameworks requires the constant collection of evidence, system screenshots, physical badge logs, user access lists, penetration testing reports, and vendor risk assessments. Operational exploitation. The documentation generated by these compliance frameworks represents a complete technical blueprint of the enterprise. Intercepting or requesting these audit packages via a social engineering ruse, e.g., posing as an enterprise client demanding a vendor SOC 2 type II report and security architecture assessment before signing a contract, yields full visibility into the target's internal security controls, unpatched exceptions, and network layout zones. Mandatory compliance exploitation matrix. Overhead domain primary regulatory framework/entity, forced institutional behavior red team exploitation vector. Cyber insurance commercial underwriters, e.g. Lloyd's AIG, Chubb, must submit detailed technical architecture, backup protocols, and incident logs annually. Pretext as a risk assessor requesting technical verification before policy renewal. Data security SOC 2 type II/ISO 27001/PCI-DSS must grant external auditors access to review physical server rooms, access logs, and policies. Impersonate third-party auditor, verifying physical access controls and clean desk policies. Environmental health OSHA/local fire marshal/EPA must grant immediate physical access to facilities, mechanical spaces, and chemical storage, physical ruse execution, emergency inspection of fire suppression and emergency egress vectors. Financial/governance SEC/corporate board/external CPA must disclose legal liabilities, pending litigation, and material financial risks. OSINT mining of SEC Form 10K 10Q filings to identify financially stressed operational units. 4. Synthesized case study, Operation Obsidian Lattice. To demonstrate the practical application of informal power mapping, rival isolation, and universal overhead exploitation, consider the following hypothetical assessment targeting Vanguard Financial Systems, a regional payment processing entity holding sensitive consumer financial data. Phase 1, OSINT harvesting and informal power mapping. The red team began by bypassing the official corporate org chart and mapping the informal power topology of Vanguard's core engineering division. Code repository mining. Searching GitHub commit histories revealed that while the chief technology officer was publicly listed as the head of engineering, a mid-level staff engineer named Julian Vance authored 70% of the core deployment scripts for the payment gateway. Friction identification. Cross-referencing Glassdoor reviews and technical forum posts authored by engineering staff revealed intense internal friction between Marcus Brody, VP of Payment Systems, the earner, and Elena Rostova, Director of Risk and Compliance, the gatekeeper. The wedge issue. Brody was under intense pressure from executive leadership to deploy a new high-speed payment API by October 1st to capture a major retail client. However, Rostova had placed an administrative hold on the deployment because the legacy database infrastructure powering the API had not completed its mandatory annual PCI-DSS Level 1 compliance audit. Brody earner needs API Live Oct 1 friction. Rostova gatekeeper blocks live deployment. A PCI-DSS audit deadline. Mandatory universal overhead. Phase 2, exploiting universal overhead and rival dynamics. The red team selected the mandatory PCI-DSS compliance audit, universal overhead, as their entry vector, positioning themselves directly between Brody, the earner, and Rostova, the gatekeeper. 1. Constructing the universal overhead pretext. the Red Team registered a domain matching Vanguard's actual external cybersecurity auditing firm, Aegis Quality Compliance, and established an authentic-looking email and phone infrastructure. 2. Targeting the earner Brody. An operator contacted Brody via phone, posing as a senior lead auditor from Aegis. The operator stated, "Mr. Brody, we are finishing up the pre-assessment for the PCI-DSS sign-off requested by Ms. Rostova. We know your team is under an aggressive deadline to launch the payment API on October 1st. To clear Ms. Rostova's compliance hold by Friday, we just need to execute a rapid, off-cycle local validation scan of the database cluster switches. We can do this silently tonight without impacting production, but we need your team to approve a temporary SSH access tunnel into the staging VLAN. 3. Executing the wedge. Brody, driven by his desire to bypass Rostova's administrative roadblock and hit his launch metric, did not call Rostova to verify the audit request. He viewed the call as a welcome intervention that would force the gatekeeper to drop her hold. Brody personally contacted Julian Vance, the informal technical hub identified in Phase 1, and ordered him to override the standard change control ticket and open the requested network tunnel immediately. Red Team posing as Aegis Compliance, Brody Earner, clear the hold, Vance informal hub. Network tunnel opened. Standard change controls bypassed. Phase 3, Physical Logical Convergence. With the temporary logical SSH tunnel established into the staging VLAN, the Red Team identified that the local database switches required a physical hardware token authorization from an on-site administrator to grant global root access. The team converted the digital momentum into a physical insertion plan using the universal overhead pretext. 1. On-site audit interception. An operator dressed in business casual attire arrived at Vanguard's headquarters at 16:30 EDT carrying a tablet, custom-printed Aegis Quality Compliance credentials, and a formal emergency PCI-DSS physical access verification form. 2. Bypassing reception. The operator approached the front reception desk and asked specifically for Julian Vance, not the executive leadership. When Vance arrived at the lobby, the operator stated, "Julian, Marcus Brody asked me to meet with you directly. We've completed the remote scan over the SSH tunnel you opened, but PCI-DSS Requirement 9 mandates a physical verification of the MAC addresses on the core transaction switches before we can issue the final compliance certificate to Elena Rostova. Marcus asked if we could knock this out in 5 minutes so he can announce the launch date tomorrow." 3. Infiltration and access. Because the operator cited the exact internal names, referenced the active conflict between Brody and Rostova, validated the secret SSH tunnel opened hours prior, and invoked the mandatory authority of Universal Overhead, PCI-DSS, Vance felt completely comfortable. Vance badged the operator past the lobby turnstiles, escorted them directly into the secure Floor 2 server suite, and stood by while the operator plugged an inline hardware keylogger directly into the core switch. Red Team operator arrives, references Brody/Rostova conflict, cites PCI-DSS Requirement 9. Escorted into server suite. Biometric and SOC controls bypassed. Via informal hub cooperation. Analytical post-mortem. The target facility's multi-million-dollar biometric access gates, 24/7 security operations center, and air-gapped core architectures were completely neutralized without firing an exploit framework or forcing a lock. The org chart deception was overcome by identifying Julian Vance as the true technical authority controlling data flows. The Earner Gatekeeper rivalry was exploited by using Marcus Brody's desire for speed to bypass standard change control protocols. The Universal Overhead Vector, PCI-DSS audit, provided the non-negotiable authority required to force both logical network access and physical server room entry. By mapping the informal reality of the institution, the Red Team transformed internal corporate friction into an operational pathway. Chapter 6: Exploiting the Security Collapse and Infrastructure Erasure. When an organization's internal friction is weaponized against its own structural paranoias, its operational security posture does not merely bend, it fractures. High-pressure administrative stress, impending compliance deadlines, and fear of executive exposure force human targets to prioritize immediate risk mitigation over long-term procedural discipline. Once this psychological tipping point is reached, the primary objective shifts from passive intelligence gathering to active exploitation, converting the induced institutional panic into rapid, unmonitored access across physical, digital, and human vectors. Once the objective is achieved and data exfiltration is complete, the final phase of the operation begins. Every cover identity, digital domain, physical artifact, and communication channel deployed during the operation represents a post-operational liability. Clean execution requires absolute operational disengagement, the systematic, trace-free dissolution of the entire operational footprint. 1. Exploiting the security collapse, forcing protocol bypasses and defense drops. The goal of creating internal crisis or regulatory pressure is not simply to cause chaos, it is to induce cognitive overload in targeted decision-makers. When key personnel face perceived existential threats to their careers or operational continuity, their decision-making defaults to survival behaviors. In this state, security controls, firewalls, multi-factor authentication, air gaps, physical visitor escorts, and multi-signature change authorizations are no longer viewed as protective barriers. They are viewed as intolerable bottlenecks that must be bypassed to save the enterprise. The mechanics of induced protocol bypasses. 1. Leveraging emergency exception workflows. Every modern enterprise maintains emergency procedures designed to restore operations during critical outages or severe compliance breaches, e.g., break glass administrative protocols. When an operator successfully triggers institutional panic, they force the target to activate these emergency workflows. Elevated privilege escalation. During a simulated compliance crisis or critical infrastructure failure, targets routinely grant temporary root or administrative access to third-party remediation specialists without performing background checks or opening formal change management tickets. Suspension of change logs. To resolve an urgent issue quickly, IT personnel frequently disable logging, bypass staging environments, and push unvetted scripts directly to core production databases. Multi-factor authentication, MFA fatigue. Pushing repeated authorization requests during a period of high operational stress causes targets to approve MFA prompts reflexively, treating them as routine administrative noise. 2. Forcing the dropping of physical defenses. In a high-stress scenario, physical security controls are often the first to be abandoned. Physical perimeters rely on human compliance. When human focus is diverted, physical security collapses entirely. Loading dock and service entrance exploitation. When an urgent delivery or emergency contractor is expected, security guards at loading docks and service bays are ordered by stressed managers to speed up the process. This leads to waived ID checks, uninspected service vehicles, and unescorted visitors inside sensitive facilities. Propped perimeter doors. Facilities personnel dealing with an active environmental issue, such as a simulated server room cooling failure, frequently prop open fire exits, stairwell doors, and server room access points to run temporary utility hoses, power cables, or ventilation ducts, neutralizing physical access controls across entire floors. Abandonment of the escort policy. Escort policies require staff to accompany external contractors at all times. When staff are overwhelmed by an operational crisis, they routinely leave contractors unattended inside server closets, administrative suites, or mechanical hubs, instructing them to lock up when done. The physical DEFENSE collapse. Simulated cooling failure, server room overheating, doors propped for ventilation. Unescorted access achieved. Operator gains unmonitored physical access to bare metal racks. 3. Forced data surrender. When a target believes they are complying with a mandatory, high-priority administrative audit or emergency recovery effort, they will voluntarily surrender proprietary data, cryptographic materials, and network topologies that would otherwise take months to extract. Direct credential harvesting. Under the guise of a mandatory security audit or credential reset, targets will provide plaintext passwords, hardware token seeds, and backup keys via unencrypted channels, e.g., direct messaging apps, verbal calls, or plaintext emails. Exfiltration via diagnostic dumps. Targets can be directed to export and upload full database schemas, Active Directory trees, and network configuration files under the belief that these files are required to diagnose an active regulatory or system fault. Technical exploitation matrix, converting panic into access. Attack domain-induced psychological trigger target operational action, resulting exploitation vector. Network security impending compliance failure, threat of regulatory shutdown, opens break glass remote access tunnel, bypasses jump box, direct, unmonitored network access into core internal subnets. Physical security active facilities emergency, critical infrastructure overheating, props emergency doors open, waves visitor logging and badge checks, unescorted physical entry to server closets and mechanical rooms. Data integrity urgent audit requirement, threat of personal legal liability, exports raw database tables, Active Directory logs, or sensitive HR files, rapid data exfiltration without running active database queries. Identity/IAM account lockout during critical executive presentation, shares administrative credentials or approves MFA push prompts, instant privilege escalation to domain admin or global admin. Operational execution, the crisis exploitation sequence. 1. Deploy the emergency stimulus, Phase 1, crisis triggering. Deliver the high-pressure pretext, e.g., an urgent notice of regulatory noncompliance or a simulated critical system alert, to the target, establishing an immediate tight deadline, e.g., 30 minutes until full compliance escalation. 2. Offer the immediate escape vector, Phase 2, channel positioning. Contact the target immediately following the trigger, positioning yourself as the sole resource capable of resolving the crisis. Present a pre-prepared, unmonitored solution that requires a temporary security bypass. 3. Guide the target to drop defenses, Phase 3, protocol override. Walk the target through the physical or logical bypass steps, e.g., opening an unmonitored SSH tunnel, badging you past security, or disabling endpoint protection, framing each action as a temporary mandatory emergency measure. 4. Execute target objective and exit, Phase 4, exfiltration and consolidation. Extract the required data, plant physical or digital persistence assets, if scoped, and verify the complete extraction of target intelligence before the target's cognitive state normalizes and verification instincts return. 2. Infrastructure erasure, dissolving cover, sanitizing footprints and breaking contact. Once the primary objective is fulfilled and target data is safely in hand, the operational posture transitions immediately from high-visibility engagement to absolute disengagement. The primary threat during this phase is attribution. If an organization realizes it has been compromised, while operational infrastructure remains active, forensic investigators can trace back the digital domains, burner phone numbers, physical vehicles, and drop locations to identify the operators. Infrastructure erasure is the systematic, chronological decommissioning of every operational asset to prevent attribution and leave the target completely unaware of the compromise. The 3 pillars of infrastructure erasure. 1. Digital and communication footprint sanitization. Every domain, email account, cloud server, and messaging channel created for the operation must be dismantled in a sequence that prevents cross-contamination or forensic reconstruction. Severing command and control, C2 and relays, terminate all active sessions, reverse shells, and VPN tunnels connected to the target infrastructure. Securely wipe all staging servers and redirection nodes using multipass disk wiping algorithms or instant cloud instance termination, commands, shred, zerofill, or immediate tenant destruction. Domain and identity dissolution, cancel domain registrations, purge DNS records, and abandon fictitious corporate email accounts. Never reuse an operational domain, IP range, or SSL certificate across multiple assignments. Burner hardware and SIM destruction. SIM cards and burner handsets utilized for social engineering or out-of-band communication must be powered down, physically destroyed, crushing the baseband and flash memory chips, and disposed of across disparate waste streams. 2. Physical asset sanitization and root cleansing. For operations involving physical penetration, Physical artifacts left behind or captured on surrounding surveillance cameras represent significant forensic liabilities. Vehicle and route sanitization. Return rental or specialized surveillance vehicles only after a deep physical cleaning to eliminate latent fingerprints, DNA, and operational notes. Remove all temporary toll transponders, GPS tracking units, and hidden camera mounts. Artifact retrieval or neutralization. Ensure no physical tools, rogue network implants, custom badges, or printed pretexts remain within the target facility unless long-term persistence is an explicit, scoped objective. Surveillance footprint minimization. When departing the target perimeter, follow pre-planned departure routes designed to avoid localized traffic cameras, public transit CCTV hubs, and high-density license plate readers, ALPRs. 3. Psychological closure and normalization. A critical component of infrastructure erasure is leaving the target in a state of psychological normalization. If a target realizes they were tricked, they will initiate an internal security audit, perform forensic analysis, and report the incident to authorities. If they believe the emergency was successfully resolved, they will simply return to their daily routine. The issue resolved confirmation. Send a final, formal communication from the cover identity confirming that the emergency audit or technical issue has been fully resolved, thanked for their cooperation, and closed in the administrative portal. This provides psychological closure to the target, ensuring they do not follow up or investigate further. Normalizing system configurations. If system settings, firewall rules, or physical access points were modified during the operation, restore them to their baseline states, or instruct the target to do so as part of post-audit cleanup procedures, to eliminate obvious anomalies during routine IT sweeps. Phase 1. Inducing the security collapse. The Red Team identified David Chen, Senior Network Operations Center NOC lead, as the primary operational hub. Chen held root credentials to internal routing infrastructure, but operated under strict change management protocols. 1. The trigger. Posing as the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council, FFIEC, Cyber Audit Division, the Red Team delivered an urgent, high-priority cryptographic notice to Aegis's Executive Council and NOC desk. The notice alleged an active, critical zero-day vulnerability in their SWIFT transaction routing interface that required immediate patching within 45 minutes to prevent a mandatory regulatory suspension of clearing operations. 2. The pressure ramp. To compound the panic, the operator called Chen directly, impersonating the chief risk officer, the gatekeeper, demanding to know why the NOC had not implemented the emergency mitigation patch provided in the regulatory bulletin. 3. The collapse. Overwhelmed by the threat of operational shutdown and executive retaliation, Chen abandoned standard change management protocols. Instead of waiting for the bi-weekly maintenance window, Chen logged into the primary NOC console to apply the emergency patch immediately. Fake regulatory zero-day notice, executive panic, call to NOC lead Chen. Protocol bypass EXECUTD. Chen bypasses 14-day staging window. Prepares direct emergency deployment. Phase 2, forcing the protocol bypass and data surrender. With Chen operating in a state of cognitive overload, the Red Team operator offered the immediate escape vector. 1. Opening the unmonitored access tunnel. The operator, posing as the FFIEC lead technical auditor, informed Chen that due to the air-gapped nature of the SWIFT network, they needed to open a temporary, unencrypted diagnostic bridge tunnel from the NOC console directly to an external verification server to validate the patch signature. 2. Surrendering core credentials. Under the belief that he was satisfying a mandatory federal compliance check, Chen opened the requested outbound SSH tunnel directly to the Red Team's temporary cloud listener. Shared the SSH private key and temporary root password over an unencrypted voice line to speed up verification. Approved 3 consecutive MFA push notifications on his physical hardware token without verifying the originating IP addresses. Chen opens outbound SSH tunnel, shares root credentials, approves MFA prompts. A complete network access. Red Team gains full root access to core SWIFT transaction routing tables. 3. Data exfiltration. Within 8 minutes of the tunnel establishment, the red team extracted target network topologies, encrypted database backups, and transaction routing tables. Phase 3. Executing infrastructure erasure. With the data package secured and verified, the disengagement protocol was initiated instantly to ensure zero attribution and prevent incident discovery. 1. Psychological closure, T plus 5 minutes, the operator called Chen, shifting to a calm, professional tone. David, the FFIEC automated verification engine has successfully validated your Swift routing signatures. Compliance status, fully compliant. You can close the diagnostic tunnel and resume standard NOC operations. Official written confirmation has been sent to your executive team. Excellent work resolving this under time pressure. Result: Chen felt relieved, closed the SSH tunnel, marked the internal ticket as resolved regulatory compliance, and did not escalate the event to the internal incident response team. 2. Digital footprint dissolution, T plus 30 minutes. The outbound SSH listener was terminated, and the cloud VPS was subjected to a 3-pass cryptographic wipe before being deleted. The spoofed FFIEC domain and email infrastructure were dismantled, and all DNS records were purged. Temporary VPN endpoints used for operational traffic were destroyed. 3. Physical and communication sanitization, T plus 2 hours. The burner SIM card and handset used for the voice pretext calls were crushed, incinerated, and disposed of across disparate waste streams. All local operational logs, temporary files, and communication transcripts were moved to an air-gapped, encrypted storage array. Operational post-mortem. The operation successfully achieved all target objectives, extracting core transaction routing data from a hardened, air-gapped financial network, without triggering a single intrusion alarm or initiating a post-incident forensic investigation. By inducing institutional panic, exploiting the resulting protocol bypasses, and executing systematic infrastructure erasure, the red team remained completely invisible, proving that the ultimate security vulnerability is never the technology itself, but the human tendencies that govern it. Part V. Field Practicum Operational Test. Chapter 8. Practical Application Scenarios. Theory without operational synthesis is an academic exercise. Up to this point, the operational framework has detailed the mechanics of pattern of life, POL, tracking, informal power topology mapping, earner gatekeeper rival isolation, and universal overhead exploitation. This chapter functions as an interactive diagnostic test. You are required to step into the role of lead intelligence operator. Below are 3 complex operational scenarios targeting distinct institutional archetypes: a private logistics empire, a fortified municipal faction, and an elite high-frequency trading firm. For each scenario, you are provided with raw open-source intelligence, OSINT data, physical reconnaissance notes, and specific operational objectives. You must analyze the dataset, identify the informal power dynamics, select the optimal human and technical targets, construct a high-fidelity cover story, and chart an uninterrupted trajectory to achieve total organizational dismantling. Diagnostic framework and evaluation matrix. As you process each scenario, evaluate your proposed operational vector against 5 core criteria. Operator evaluation matrix. 1. Informal hub selection. Did you bypass formal executive titles to isolate the individual with actual capability? 2. Wedge exploitation. Did you position your entry vector precisely inside an active earner gatekeeper rivalry? 3. Overhead Weaponizing. Is your pretext anchored in a non-negotiable legal, financial, or regulatory mandate? 4. Protocol collapse. Does your execution force the target to voluntarily bypass their own security controls? 5. Erasure and attribution. Does your exit leave zero forensic trail while providing psychological closure to the target? Scenario 1. Vanguard Maritime Logistics, a private shipping conglomerate. Operational context. Vanguard Maritime Logistics, VML, operates as a private, highly secretive shipping conglomerate controlling 3 deepwater port terminals along the eastern seaboard. While publicly presenting as a standard container freight operator, intelligence indicates VML's regional board utilizes redacted cargo manifests to facilitate off-book maritime transit for illicit international syndicates. Raw OSINT intelligence and reconnaissance package. 1. Harbor Authority records and municipal filings. Terminal 4 lease agreement. VML holds a 30-year exclusive operational lease with the Municipal Port Authority. A recently added municipal addendum mandates quarterly environmental safety and hazardous material compliance audits following a fuel spill 8 months ago. Customs inspections logs, automated commercial environment, ACE, manifests show a recurring 14-hour gap between physical vessel berthing at berth 12 and digital manifest submission to U.S. Customs. This delay is consistently authorized by Captain Henrik Vance, Director of Port Operations, the earner. 2. Technical infrastructure and job listings. Recruitment postings dated 3 weeks prior. VML posted an urgent listing for a senior systems administrator legacy infrastructure. Requirements state, must have 10+ years experience maintaining air-gapped IBM AS400 database clusters running custom RPG-based manifest software. Knowledge of legacy token ring network bridges required. Location, Terminal 4 Operations Annex. Employee social footprints. A forum post on a database administration community by user DBA Greg VML states, management refuses to upgrade our legacy AS400 core. I'm forced to manually bridge the digital manifest server to the local terminal network via an unmonitored serial to Ethernet adapter every time Customs demands an emergency audit. One of these days this jury-rigged setup is going to drop. 3. Compliance and governance histories. Internal governance audit. Evelyn Reed, Chief Compliance Officer, the gatekeeper, recently issued an internal memo blocking Vance's proposed $4 million terminal expansion budget, citing unresolved environmental audit discrepancies and unverified cargo discrepancies flagged by the Harbour Authority. Board dynamics. The Regional Executive Board consists of 5 non-operational directors who rely entirely on quarterly financial distributions driven by Vance's port throughput metrics, while ignoring Reed's compliance warnings. Scenario 2. The Metro District Police Union, a fortified faction. Operational context. The Metro District Police Union, MDPU, operates as a powerful political and legal fortress, insulating corrupt regional law enforcement executives from judicial oversight. The union maintains a private, heavily encrypted internal affairs defense database, housed in an off-site, reinforced administrative facility. Raw OSINT intelligence and reconnaissance package. 1. Municipal liability and insurance filings. Risk underwriting document. The city's primary municipal liability carrier, Municipal Risk Underwriters Corp., recently issued a conditional insurance renewal notice. The policy requires MDPU to undergo a mandatory third-party physical and digital security assessment of their legal records vault following a high-profile evidence leakage incident last year. Litigation filings. A class-action civil rights lawsuit against the union highlights a systematic pattern of disappearing disciplinary files prior to judicial subpoenas, citing the union's private internal affairs defense network, IADN. 2. Structural and vendor reconnaissance. Facility access logs and RFP filings. Municipal vendor registries reveal that physical access controls at the MDPU facility are maintained by an external vendor, Titan Security Solutions. Titan recently deployed an upgraded biometric access system, but the secondary basement HVAC and utility corridors remain on legacy mechanical physical keyways managed by Apex Facility Maintenance. Union organizational complaints. Internal union message boards reveal deep resentment from junior officers, the earners, toward executive union trustees, the gatekeepers. A posted complaint reads, trustees are spending millions on private legal defense funds and luxury retreats, while patrol officers face slashed benefit packages and broken squad radios. 3. Key personnel identification. Arthur Pendleton, Chief Legal Counsel and Master Cryptographic Custodian for the Union, the gatekeeper. Pendleton holds sole physical possession of the hardware security module, HSM, smart card required to decrypt the IADN archive. Officer Thomas Briggs, Vice President of Union Operations, the earner. Briggs handles day-to-day administrative vendor contracts, manages facility upgrades, and is aggressively lobbying to oust Pendleton to secure funding for operational patrol gear. Scenario 3, Ethelgard Fintech, a high-frequency trading firm. Operational context. Ethelgard Fintech is a quantitative high-frequency trading HFT firm processing billions in daily transactions through proprietary, algorithmic trading models. Ethelgard operates from a secured, high-density server facility, maintaining cold storage cryptoledger assets worth hundreds of millions as reserve capital. Raw OSINT intelligence and reconnaissance package. 1. Regulatory mandates and patent registrations. SEC mandate filings. The SEC recently instituted Rule 15c35, risk management controls for broker-dealers, stress test mandates. Ethelgard was issued a formal 30-day compliance warning requiring proof of automated kill switch integrity for their algorithmic routing engines. Patent filings. Ethelgard's core patent for ultra-low latency algorithmic order execution lists Dr. Aris Thorne, founder and CTO, as sole inventor. The patent documentation includes detailed block diagrams of their internal fiber routing topology and cold storage vault connectivity. 2. Personnel health and operational logs. Executive health logs, public medical leave records and local hospital check-in data indicate Dr. Aris Thorne, the visionary gatekeeper, recently suffered a major cardiac event and is currently incapacitated, leaving day-to-day operations to Siddharth Rao, Senior Vice President of Trading Operations, the earner. Internal operational strain. Glassdoor reviews from senior quantitative developers detail extreme operational stress. With Dr. Thorne out, Rao is pushing us to trade at 120% capacity while bypassing SEC risk checks. The automated kill switch has been put in test mode, so it doesn't interrupt trading volume. 3. Physical and technical surveillance. Fiber riser physical location. Facilities blueprints show Ethelgard leases the 14th floor of a downtown financial tower. Their primary dark fiber link runs down a shared utility riser in the building core, maintained by Metropolitan Fiber Corp. Cold storage hardware. Cold storage ledger keys are stored on air-gapped physical hardware security modules located in a dedicated, temperature-controlled vault adjacent to Dr. Thorne's private corner office. Practicum solutions and operator assessments. Solution 1, Vanguard Maritime Logistics. VML exploitation flow. Harbor Authority pretext. Target, DBA Greg Trigger Serial Ethernet Bridge. Board dissolution, exfiltrate manifests, bypass air gap via AS400 bridge. 1. Informal power map and target isolation. Informal hub, DBA Greg VML. Despite holding a junior title, Greg manages the physical bridge between the legacy AS400 database and the network. He holds functional data access. The earner versus gatekeeper pair. Captain Henrik Vance, the earner, throughput-driven, versus Evelyn Reed, the gatekeeper, compliance-driven. 2. Pretext engineering and universal overhead. Universal overhead vector. Mandatory Harbor Authority Environmental and Hazardous Material Compliance Audit, Municipal Addendum. The ruse, pose as a municipal port authority environmental inspector, conducting an unannounced emergency inspection regarding an unflagged chemical container berthing at berth 12. 3. Tactical execution trajectory. 1. Trigger the environmental emergency, Phase 1, pretext deployment. Contact Captain Henrik Vance posing as the municipal port authority, threatening an immediate operational freeze of berth 12 due to a hazardous chemical discrepancy on the incoming vessel. 2. Force the technical bypass, Phase 2, wedge exploitation. Demand immediate digital verification of the unredacted manifest. Vance, terrified of port downtime, orders DBA Greg to execute the emergency serial to Ethernet bridge to connect the AS400 cluster to the network. 3. Extract manifests via legacy bridge, Phase 3, digital exfiltration. Access the temporary network bridge remotely or via local Wi-Fi drop device installed in the Terminal 4 annex and exfiltrate the unredacted AS400 manifest database. 4. Trigger institutional collapse, Phase 4, board dissolution execution. leak the unredacted manifests, showing off-book transit for criminal syndicates, directly to federal law enforcement and Evelyn Reed, CCO. The resulting federal indictments forced the immediate dissolution of the regional board. Solution 2, Metro District Police Union. MDPU exploitation flow. Insurance audit pretext. Target VP Briggs. Gain access via Apex Keyway. Executive purge. Leak disciplinary archive. Extract HSM cryptographic keys. 1. Informal power map and target isolation. Informal hub. Apex facility maintenance technicians holding physical master keys to secondary utility corridors, bypassing Titan Security's biometric turnstiles. The earner versus gatekeeper pair. Officer Thomas Briggs, the earner, operational frustrated versus Arthur Pendleton, the gatekeeper, legal cryptographic custodian. 2. Pretext engineering and universal overhead. Universal overhead vector. Municipal risk underwriters caught mandatory physical and digital vault risk assessment, insurance policy renewal requirement. The ruse. Pose as a risk engineer from municipal risk underwriters, conducting a mandatory structural and physical asset survey of the legal records vault to prevent insurance cancellation. 3. Tactical execution trajectory. 1. Deploy insurance audit demand. Phase 1. Pretext deployment. Issue a formal notice to VP Thomas Briggs, stating that failure to allow an immediate physical vault risk assessment will result in the total cancellation of the union's municipal liability coverage. 2. Bypass biometric controls via secondary keyway. Phase 2. Physical infiltration. Arrive on site as the risk engineer. Briggs, desperate to avoid insurance cancellation, instructs Apex facility maintenance to escort you through the basement utility corridor, bypassing Pendleton's biometric security checkpoints. 3. Clone HSM smartcard/extract keys. Phase 3. Cryptographic extraction. Utilize physical access inside the legal records vault to clone Arthur Pendleton's HSM smartcard credential, or insert an inline physical keylogger on the HSM terminal. Exfiltrate the IADN master encryption keys. 4. Execute decryption and public leak. Phase 4. Executive purge trajectory. Decrypt the Internal Affairs Defense Archive detailing systemic executive corruption and financial embezzlement. Publish the records through federal prosecutors and junior officer representatives, triggering an immediate executive purge. Solution 3. Ethelgard FinTech. ATHELGARD exploitation flow. Sec Rule 15C35 pretext. Target, VP Rao, force kill switch test mode. Regulatory collapse, exfiltrate ledgers, interceptors on fiber riser/vault. 1. Informal power map and target isolation. Informal hub, Siddharth Rao, SVP of Trading Operations, currently operating without founder oversight while struggling to maintain trading volume under SEC pressure. The earner versus gatekeeper pair. Siddharth Rao, the earner, volume-driven, versus the incapacitated Dr. Aris Thorne, the gatekeeper, founder-inventor. 2. Pretext engineering and universal overhead. Universal overhead vector. SEC Rule 15C35, Market Access Rule, Emergency Compliance Stress Test. The ruse. Pose as an SEC Division of Trading and Markets Compliance Officer, demanding an immediate live stress test of the algorithmic kill switch infrastructure, following flagged order anomalies. 3. Tactical execution trajectory. 1. Issue SEC Emergency Compliance Order, Phase 1, Pretext deployment. Deliver an urgent SEC compliance mandate to Siddharth Rao detailing an immediate risk audit of Ethelgard's algorithmic order execution routing. 2. Force kill switch deactivation, Phase 2, Forced system exposure. Rao, terrified of regulatory suspension while Dr. Thorne is incapacitated, forces developers to place the automated kill switch into test mode, and root execution logs through an external diagnostic tap. 3. Execute fiber tap and cold storage extraction, Phase 3, Physical riser and vault access. Access the shared metropolitan fiber utility, riser on floor 14, to intercept raw diagnostic data streams. Simultaneously, access the adjacent vault room under the pretext of physical kill switch verification to clone cold storage ledger keys. 4. Exfiltrate assets and trigger market shutdown. Phase 4. Regulatory cascade trajectory. Exfiltrate cold storage crypto assets while transmitting proof of unmonitored algorithmic trading to the SEC. The resulting emergency regulatory order permanently revokes Ethelguard's broker-dealer license.